Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to start this meeting. This evening, we have three agendas we're going to be following. We're going to be following the special meeting of Council, which is going to be dealing with Department of Planning and Development Services, report number 2014-48. The subject to this meeting is going to be a public hearing report, a background study, and development charges bylaw update. Following that, we are going to proceed with our Committee of the Whole agenda, and then following that, we'll get into our Council meeting, which we would, as I always say, expect to not only validate and verify, but also bring forward all the motions that were at the Committee of the Whole meeting and hopefully ratify those motions that we had debate on. So with that, I am going to ask Councillor Yvonne Doucette if you can start us off with a prayer, followed by Mr. Joe Longfellow with the National Anthem. Councillor Doucette.
Au nom du Père, et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit. Amen. Mon Dieu, on est réunis pour les citoyens de Colborne. On vous demande la sagesse d'écouter et d'être prêt à faire les décisions difficiles. Prenons les décisions qui bénéficient le plus grand nombre des citoyens. Amen.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command. Car ton bras s'est porté le pays, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée de plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Joel. Well done as always.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Members of Council, I'll now need a motion to confirm the agenda, please. Councillor Steele, Councillor Kenny, are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? With none, so noted by the clerk. We'll now proceed with our public hearing under the Development Charges Act, Department of Planning and Development Services, report number 2014, and the subject once again is a public hearing report, background study, and development charges bylaw update. I'm assuming, Mr. Aquilina, you're taking this on?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to bring forward Mr. Scanlon, who will actually present the background study and the bylaw that's being proposed.
Wonderful. Mr. Scanlon, welcome.
Thank you.
If you want to come up and just press the little gray button there and you're live.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. There we go. It's a pleasure to be here. This evening, as was noted, it's a mandatory requirement under the Development Charges Act that if you're going to update your bylaw, there's a process that we must go through. We have to prepare a background study, draft bylaw. That information has to be released at least 2 weeks in advance of this meeting, and then notice of the meeting has to be provided 20 days before, and those requirements have been met. The format for the public meeting, similar to any other public meeting. You've had the opening remarks. I'll make a presentation, and then questions to council, the public, and then close the meeting. This evening, we won't be considering the bylaw. We've gone through a process with staff. As you can see, we've updated the growth forecast. We've gone through the policies to see how the bylaw has been performing, and there's been some minor refinements which I'll touch upon. And then subsequent to the public meeting tonight, Council can consider the bylaw. And I think tentatively it's set for the last meeting of August for consideration. Development charges are not new. They've been around now for 60 years. They used to be called lot levies because they were imposed under the Planning Act, and they were imposed when you created the lot. Since 1989, we've had an actual piece of legislation called the Development Charges Act, and that's what we've been using since that time, approximately 25 years. 1997, they updated the Act, and they've made, which introduced a number of reductions, deductions, exemptions, limitations, and I'll quickly go through those. But development charges are not full cost recovery. Historically, they were. But since the 1997 legislation, they're not. You can probably recover somewhere in the range of 75 to 80% of your growth-related costs. As you can see, limitations on services. We can't collect for parkland acquisition. Under the Planning Act, you make dedications of land. We used to be able to top up and actually add for more land, but since 97 that's been excluded. If you see later in the proposal where it talks about parkland development, once we have the land, we can provide to landscape the land to make it a functional park, put on play areas or soccer field, baseball diamonds, etc. So we can put all the amenities. You can develop it into a park. We just can't buy the land. And that's the only service where we can't buy land. Next one's municipal halls. Generally, it's the headquarters for the general administration we can't provide for. So council chambers, your clerk's department, finance, legal, CIO, those are part of your general administration, and as I say, we can't collect for those. All of the arts and cultural services have been eliminated, so theaters, museums, art galleries. The only one that's been allowed to continue is libraries. Solid waste service, completely gone, so that's recycle, reuse, landfill, and even curbside pickup vehicles. Hospital grants we used to collect for, that's been removed. And then they put categorizations on vehicles and equipment, so they really want you to only provide for the bigger assets, the things that last 7 years or longer. And then computer equipment's a minor reduction for really for servers or PCs. Quickly, the steps we go through are outlined here. The Act actually, the Act and the regulations have extensive words around how you do these calculations, but in quick essence, it's we identify the amount, type, and location of growth. The amount is really limited to a 10-year planning horizon for most services. We can go any period of time for the hard services, the water, the wastewater, storm, roads, and even police and fire. And everything else is, as I say, limited to 10 years. Type of growth is residential versus non-residential, and then we give consideration to the location of growth because that helps us identify capital works. We then identify the servicing needs for that growth, and those servicing needs translate into capital costs. When we have the costs, we make a number of deductions, grant subsidies, other contributions, have to consider if there's any direct benefit to the existing development. There's a mandatory 10% deduction for most services, not the water, wastewater, roads, the hard services we don't. But for all other services, we get to the bottom of the calculation, the Act says deduct an extra 10%. So those are your parks, recreation, many of the softer types of services, library, transit. We have historic service measurements, so what the Act says is what we charge in the future can be no higher than the average level of service that we've provided over the past 10 years. And if you look at Appendix B, we go through these calculations, and all of your calculations are well within the service standards calculated. We're then left with the net cost, and from there we allocate it between residential, non-residential development, divide it back by the growth, and that's how we develop the charge. For residential growth, we have a low, medium, and high density. So low density is single and semi-detached. Medium density, we have charges for townhouses. High density, we have charges for apartments. Non-residential is charged on a per square foot basis. Oops, sorry about that. The Act provides mandatory exemptions, so there's further deductions where we can't collect money. They're not a large amount, but you can see that, There's a bit of an error here. Actually, we've cut and pasted the discretionary exemptions twice, so you're not seeing double. It should have said mandatory exemptions. The mandatory aren't extensive, but basically for industrial growth, if you have an existing building, you can expand that building up to 50% and no charge is payable. If you have single-family homes, you can add 2 additional apartments to the home, and as long as you don't double the size of the home, you don't have to pay for those 2 apartments. If you've got a townhouse complex, apartment complex, you can add 1 additional units. So there's minor intensification provisions that are made within the Act, and those are spelled out once again in your bylaw, but of course they're still in the Act. The other one, which is not noted here, is really a local government exemption. That's saying that if you develop, when you pass your bylaw, you can't impose it on the region and you can't impose it on the school boards. They both pass bylaws, so if they pass bylaws, they won't charge you for any building that you construct. So it's kind of a quid pro quo, not charging each other. On the discretionary exemption, and you can look at the top or the bottom of this screen, this is where the Act allows you to put into place any fine-tuning or any policies that you want specifically for your municipality. And we can reduce the charge in whole or part for certain types of developments or certain classes of developments. What we most often see is exemption for churches, exemption for bona fide farms. Quite often we'll see reductions for industrial buildings, and there may be others. Sometimes downtown cores may be exempted or charges reduced, etc. Once again, that's you as your council fine-tune the policies for your particular municipality. If the charges are going up considerably, you can consider phasing in over time. And then the last one just talks about redevelopment credits, and that's basically to say if my house burns down, I should be given a period of time to replace it, or if I have a non-residential building and I tear it down, I should be given a period of time. And most often we'll see 5 years, 4 or 5 years as the general term that's allowed for that redevelopment credit. With respect to your particular bylaw currently, what we have is non-residential farm buildings are basically exempt. You have a couple of areas, the downtown core and I guess the old Hawthorne area, which is or the Main Street Gateway area, which is exempted from the charges. Industrial charges, there are some exemptions for the first 5,000 square feet. We have partial exemptions within the Sherkston secondary plan area. They only pay for certain services. And then there's partial exemptions for brownfield development. The only new one that we're looking at is there's additional community improvement plan, the East Village area and waterfront. They'll be added to those areas. Now, I'd note in the background study, we haven't, the first 2 that I talked about, the exemption areas, the downtown and the other one, they're currently in the bylaw and those maps are in there, and we'll have to add 1 additional map, but unfortunately they weren't included in the study, but in the draft bylaw, but they will be when they're before council in August. As we move forward and we consider these charges, there's not a lot of magic to these charges. As we have growth, there's always compelling needs to add additional infrastructure. Water and sewer is normally the easiest one to identify because if within the urban areas, if you don't have the water hookup, you don't have access to the water, then you're not going to get a building permit. You have to have that infrastructure in place. Other infrastructure we see, like roads, quite often the need arises as we get the development, and obviously parkland or recreation services, etc., grows as the population grows. With those costs, there's no magic. I mean, we either recover wholly or partially off the development charge, or you don't have to have a bylaw. It's not mandatory to have a development charge bylaw, but if you're not collecting there, then it means that all of the costs are basically recovered from property taxes or from your water and wastewater rates for those services. So when we go through this process, council is always trying to consider the balance of fully collecting or partially collecting off development charges, and what they don't collect then hits the property taxes or rates. The growth forecast is summarized in the Appendix A to our report. It's generally in line with the forecast with the region of Niagara. You can see that historic building activity has been presented in the black, and you can see we've had lower periods and higher periods throughout the last 10 years. The average level of building activity is in the red. So we're showing generally a slightly higher forecast on average over the next 18 years. The blue represents single-family homes. The burgundy is medium density townhouses, if you will, and high-density apartments is in the yellow. Summarizing the forecast, we've got about 560 units over the next 10 years, or about over 1,000 over the 18-year period. Translates into roughly 700 people growth in the shorter term and about 1,500 in the longer term. And you can see the non-residential square footage forecast is presented on the bottom. The services we've included in the background study are the same services that are currently within the your bylaw. We've got roads, we have public works, fire, outdoor recreation, which is basically parks, indoor rec, which is your arenas and community center space. We have libraries and administration being growth-related studies. And these are the charges that are calculated for council's consideration. You can see these charges at the top. If I just explain the chart across the top, we've got single and semi-detached. Other multiples is your medium density townhouses, and then we've got two categories of apartments. And this is commercial, industrial, institutional. And as we go down the side, you can see the services. These are services that are imposed across all of the municipality. And then these bottom services, which are called urban, are basically when you're within the areas receiving water and wastewater services, you'll pay these charges. So municipal-wide, for example, the single semi-detached charge is about $5,800 anywhere within the municipality. And then for new single-family homes being constructed within the urban area, there'd be about $550 charge for wastewater, another $2,200 for water, so about next to $2,700. So in total, at the high end at almost $8,600. Non-residential is $3.16 per square foot. And you can see roughly half of that is the municipal wide, and then the other half is the harder services. This is a comparison of your current bylaw versus the calculations. You can see on the municipal wide charges, we actually have a bit of a reduction, about $1,100. Most of the reduction you can see is in the parks and recreation area. Generally, roads, a little minor increase and minor increases here or there, but as I say, for the most part, it's parks and recreation that's reduced. And then the water and wastewater, you can see there's a slight increase in that area. Overall, the charge currently is about $9,100 for a brand new single detached home, and the calculated charge is about $8,600. On the non-residential side, you can see currently for commercial institutional, you've got a charge of $3.40. And for industrial, the council of the day selected a reduction for industrial, and we had a charge roughly about 40 cents of the full charge. So there was a reduction. Our calculated charge this time around, you can see, is a reduction from $3.40 down to $3.16. If council wished to continue with the similar types of policy for industrial and put it in at, say, 40 cents of this, then this charge would drop to roughly about $1.24. So that's something council can consider further, give guidance back to staff, and we can appropriately put in the proper schedules. Last few slides are just to compare these recommended, your existing and your recommended charges to other areas within Niagara region. We've even selected some other areas outside of the region just to give you a perspective of not just Niagara region, but what others are charging. You can see that, just to explain, oops, sorry about that. I keep hitting the roller ball. To explain the chart, the lower tier, such as yourself, is denoted in the blue, and then the upper tier, so the regional charges, is presented in the red. And where you see the yellow, that's the education development charges. You can see currently your charge right now is in the blue depicted here, and then the recommended charge, about $600 less, is depicted in the green. So you're at the lower end of the charge. You can see St. Catharines doesn't have a lower tier charge, just a regional charge. A lot of their development currently is redevelopment. We have West Lincoln, Welland, and then you can see your proposed charge, and then we have the Pelham Font Hill area. And then you can see as we move across, the charges are somewhat higher. We get into, I guess, the highest within the region is within Thorold, the Rolling Meadows area. We've got a couple others. You can see we put in the west end of the GTA just as a comparison. You can see that Milton, Burlington, full charges are in the 50,000 to 60,000 range. You can see just down the road, Hamilton is about 30,000. Guelph is a titch less at about 29,000. So, as I say, we've just provided you a broad perspective at this end of the lake and kind of just the outer areas. Look at non-residential. You can see the commercial charges are running in total. The regional charges are the significant charge. Currently, you're at about $3 a square foot. You can see the largest component of the charge is the region. So a combined charge, you're at $15 a square foot and a marginal reduction as the proposed. You can see West Lincoln and Pelham and St. Catharines are marginally below you, and the rest of the region is actually a little higher. At the top end, once again, you can see Burlington Milton in the $30 plus cost per square foot. Industrial, normally we see lesser charges, reductions and such, and as was noted in your slide, you've got a lesser charge. This just shows the calculated rate now. If you choose to reduce it, it would be in this order of magnitude. So currently your industrial charge is running at about $6 per square foot. If you added the full calculated, you'd be in and about $8 a square foot. You see as we go across, there's a number of areas that Niagara on the Lake, I think, or Lincoln, I'm sorry, is the highest within the region, running at about $12 to $13 a square foot. And that's it. I'm happy to entertain any questions. As I say, from this point forward, when we close the meeting, no consideration of the bylaw tonight, but over the next 4 weeks, with Council's guidance, we'll prepare a bylaw for your consideration.
Thank you. Members of Council, any questions or comments? Councilor Steele?
Thank you, Worship. Actually, more towards staff than the presenter. Is that fine?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Through you to Mr. Aquilina. Dan, I mean, in reviewing this and looking at, and obviously, we've got even a quite extensive comparison between us and Niagara, and a little bit beyond touching on the GTA, the Golden Horseshoe area. I mean, quite frankly, when I read this, I was a little bit more surprised that we were as low as we were compared to a lot of other communities that are seeing quite a bit of development, and they also have higher charges than us. However, we haven't seen a lot of development. Slowly moving south. I think most of us around this horseshoe may have an idea of why. Part of it is land banking and not coming into areas before they fill up their subdivisions in the north end. However, and you and I spoke about this today, and I know my fellow councillor had the same thought when after you spoke to Barb and then I spoke to you. If we did like a 2-year freeze on development charges, like a zero, have it zero, especially on the home, semi-detached, that type of apartment building maybe, that side of it, and then gradually went back up to I mean, you obviously have to keep calculating these fees as time goes on and costs go up for the municipality, but that's something I'd like to see come forward in your report where you can give us some idea of what's been the average intake of development charges, what's been the average tax intake for those average number of properties being built, so that if we went to a zero, we would know that, you know, we aren't collecting this much development fees. However, if we spur on development, you build X amount of houses, you can almost get back to that dollar value by saying, look, you know, we're traditionally building 30 houses a year, but if we go to 100 houses a year or 50 houses a year, we're going to close that gap. But we are going to spur on development, which gives you a tax dollar year after year after year. It brings more people to your town. Hopefully your businesses start to grow. So, you know, it's that snowball effect. So personally, and I know my fellow councillor wants to probably speak on the same thing, is in your report coming back, I'd really like to see information of that. If we do a 2-year zero, what types of numbers should we expect to get or not get, but that we want to reach for, so that we know that we could, you know, where are those dollars coming from to pay for some of these services. The biggest thing, though, if you look at it, is and again, the majority of councillors around this horseshoe have seen it, where we have lots of proposed subdivisions, and I've made this public before, certain councillors here have, certain past councillors. It's all nice and pretty when, and I know you haven't, but staff in the past, planners in the past said, well, you've got this many houses that are sitting there and nobody's building on it. Again, it's probably not where somebody wants to live. You can have all the subdivisions you want. If nobody wants to live in that part of town, if it's, and to me, the prime example is between McDonald's and the old Port Pontiac. They tried to pre-sell that, nothing happened. I don't think people want to live there. Yet, if you look at the west end of town where we're building, we're almost full up over there. You know, those subdivisions full up. Shamrock subdivision filled up fairly quickly as far as the number of houses in that area. There's lots of vacant properties in those areas where all the roads are there, except for the inner roads, which the developer does anyways. All the water and sewers in the area, the main sewer lines, the main water lines, to tie into, again, that's what the developer does. It's part of their costs. So that's why I'd really like to see maybe a 2-year moratorium on a zero. Try to spur on development. We have seen some development, your worship, in the past on some of the CIPs we've done with zero, the industrial and commercial that we've done. We have seen some gains in those areas. I mean, JBL is one of the perfect examples, and they continue to expand, and there's not a huge cost to them compared to what our old numbers were. So if you could bring that forward, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We certainly will. We'll do so in concert with Mr. Scanlon and CN Washington and Associates.
Great. And if I can add to that, Mr. Aquilina, if in fact we're going to look at something like a 2-year freeze on development charges, if we can look on the other side of the balance sheet with respect to if in fact that was going to happen, then what cost would then be borne by the taxpayer based on certain pro formas? So I think we should look at that side too, because the last thing we want council, or the future council to be faced with is obviously a cost on the other side based on some of the deferred costs that are happening from development charges.
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. We will include that.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Thank you, Councillor Steele. I have Councillor Baudou and Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Steele touched on it, but I just want to make sure it's clear, and I'm sure Mr. Agolino will bring this forward. But if we did the freeze, and if there was some development, you will include in there what could be a cost to us for services if it had to be upgraded. I know we don't do sewers just for the houses that are there. We look at a little bit of capacity for new ones. But if there was to be some, you know, some cost to the city as far as putting services in, I'm sure you would include that in your report.
Mr. Aquilina.
Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bonner, we will include that. And the other thing to take into consideration, there are other services that are beyond roads, and Mr. Scanlon touched on that. Fire, parks, library, all under the development charges. So it's hard to actually quantify what those costs would be, but we will do our best.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, through you to Mr. Aquilina, and thank you very much for your presentation, Mrs. Scallon. I just wanted to ask a question. We presently, in our industrial development, in the report that we have, said that we currently waive fees for any construction over 5,000 square feet. So the city of Port Colborne waives that development fee. Can we look at that as well for the industrial sector? I'd like to see maybe that expanded even more than 5,000 square feet. If we're going to really, we want that industry in, manufacturing or whatever it is, we want that to expand, we want that development to continue. So can we, in the report that comes back to us, look at that as well?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Kenny, just some clarification. We currently, right now, in our industrial CIP, waive all development
Okay.
charges for industrial.
Okay, so in the industrial sector.
Yes.
Okay.
If I can take a moment, and thank you, Councillor Kenny, because you raised a good point with respect to the incentives that are actually contained within the report. If we look at page 5, and I believe it's the 9th or the 8th slide, the presenter had touched on a few of the incentives that are currently available within the city of Port Colborne, including the industrial CIP, the waterfront CIP, the gateway CIP. Dan, if you can go into some depth with respect to what those incentives are and what's currently being offered as part of that menu, that suite of incentives by the city of Port Colborne, and in some cases in partnership with the region, I think it'd be very helpful.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, we will include that.
Oh,
right now?
Right now, right.
We have, as you are aware, we have 6 CAPs in place. We have the East Waterfront CIP, we have the Downtown CIP, the Old Humberston CIP, Brownfield CIP, Gateway CIP, and we have the Regions CIP Gateway as well. So each CIP contains a whole suite of incentives. They're very similar between them all. Some CIPs offer more, some CIPs offer others. And the financial amounts that the municipality actually gives, coupled with the region's contribution, we're looking at facade improvement programs, residential intensification programs, commercial intensification programs, parking lot improvements, signage, landscaping. I can go on. It's quite robust.
Now, specific to development charges, the CIPs offer what?
Currently, right now, if you're within the downtown CIP, you have 0 or 50%? 50% development charges reduction for all the CIPs. The only one that gives 100% right now is the industrial CIP.
So currently, if you're within the industrial CIP areas, which is predominantly the entire city,
It is, Mr. Mayor.
there is no development charges.
So if you have, Mr. Mayor, if you have commercial development within the downtown, within the CIP areas outside the municipality, being the Gateway, being the Old Humberston area, that as well as a 50% reduction for commercial and residential. And then the region also matches that
Thank
under
you,
the
Mr.
smarter
Appley.
growth incentive programs.
Thank you. And members of council, as you know, that's the reason why we created so many CIPs in the area, so we can actually cover as much territory as we can within all 3 sectors, industrial, commercial, retail, as well as residential. Okay. Further questions or comments? Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I believe about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, we attempted to change the development charges a bit with residential. And I don't remember if it was half, we were charging less, or 0, but can you go back and check and see if that was worth doing? And come back with, when you come back with your report, indicate that, because if I remember right, the value of that was minimal. The increase in construction was not a lot, so.
Mr. Aquilina.
Through Mr. Mayor, we will include that. We will research that and bring that forward in the report to council.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor, and I guess I'll echo Councillor Steele's thoughts too, with reverted back to 0 for a couple of years. I guess the 2 slides that caught my attention, and I'll ask Mr. Scanlon if he can put up the list of the services that development charges cover. If you look at table 3.3 and 3.4 in the report, if you take a look at the housing starts, or the housing unit starts, from 2001 to 2011, on the chart on 3.4, it's figure 3.2 annual housing forecast, it actually shows unit starts in that 10-year period of about 420 units, which seems like a lot of units which have development charges applied to them. Yet if you go to the slide up above, table 3.1, and you take a look at the population of the city actually remained constant in its population. So if you take a look at the services that development charges are applied to, outside of the hard services and the roads and water, wastewater, I'm not sure that there was any implication on the soft services. If you didn't have any extra people in town, how did your library require more services and administration and outdoor recreation and indoor? Fire I could understand because you've got a few more units in town to look after. I don't know if we even increased the size of the fire department or the number of fire trucks that we had in town. So when I take a look at this, and I understand why St. Catharines waived their development charges because they're basically infilling, but we haven't expanded in town, save and except for maybe up the north end and Westwood. And I would like to see, if you're going to develop a subdivision per se, I can understand development charges in a subdivision because of the hard services, the roads and the sewers and the water. But when we're infilling, I really can't see this being applied. And I guess the one instance that comes to my mind is when Mr. Matheson was here and replacing the building at the corner of Steele and Kalali, when there was previously a building there, and he missed the time frame. Because when they took the building down, I think Dan can corroborate that there was a time frame where if he rebuilt within a time frame, the development charges were waived. But because that time frame has elapsed, now we're going to hit you with the development charges, which really doesn't, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. Because if you're going to build within 5 years and get it for free, I don't care if you rebuild within 40 years, you're still using the same services that already exist. So when I take a look at those two charts and I see all those starts and there was no growth in people, you're basically having development charges applied against your building for services that you're going to incur, and yet it doesn't look like any of those services incurred any extra use. So I'll agree with Councillor Steele again. I'd look for zero development charges at least for 2 years. Let's see it. See if it does anything. At worst, if we get a few extra buildings and we've got to put a little bit extra on the tax base, it's shared amongst everybody. I mean, there's a lot of building that we've done in town lately where it's been a shared cost for everybody to pick it up. So when I take a look at those two charts, I think I've even said it before, I'd like to see zero anyways. I'd even like to see the region reduce theirs because against us right now, I think it's a $10,000 charge per unit that you build, a single-family dwelling, which is a little tough to swallow. So those are my thoughts.
Great question, Councillor. Mr. Scanlon, any comments? I'm going to come to, Dan, I'm going to come to you next.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, those observations, I mean, some of the things such as outdoor recreation, I would say, if you're getting parkland dedication and then, you know, the neighborhood parks are normally generated within those areas, that would be an area, more of a specific service that would have to be accommodated as well. And with any of the other ones, it depends on the programs that are offering. I mean, if the community's aging and such, you may be moving, you know, and shifting off of arenas and into different types of programs. So sometimes those shifts, even though the population's not changing, you're obviously having more units. And with those units, you get a change in the demographics. I haven't looked at the details of your changing demographics that specific, but a lot of times that's what gives rise. But there's probably 5 of those services which are direct, and you can see directly the impacts. The others might be a little less specific, so I acknowledge that.
Great, thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Mr. Aquilina, any comments?
No, Mr. Mayor, I don't.
Just one question. I'm not sure who will want to answer it, but when you look at, and I think Dave or Councillor Elliott brings a good point up, but when you have a building there, and of course it's already serviced through traditional servicing, whether it be roads, water, wastewater, etc. Is it safe to say that a lot of the new charges that would be placed on a new building going up, for example, on the corner of Kalali and Steele Street, would look after enhancements and or upgrades to the services that were put in 50, 60, 70 years ago, or not?
If it's right adjacent to the property, then yes. If it's, a lot of times what we see is downstream, you know, improvements to pumping stations, water mains, sewers, you know, 3 blocks away, the intersection impacts, those type of things. So And why the 5 years normally is after a period of time, and we're redoing these studies, we're taking a look at capacities and how much usage. I mean, that usage ends up being lost. And there has specifically been Ontario Municipal Board hearings in this area. And part of the thing is that I've seen initially, before it was really defined, I remember, I think it was up in Aurelia, having a person take a picture of a homestead from the 1840s and saying, look, there used to be a house here, I should get a credit. So somewhere between that extreme and you know, the 5 years, there has to be some types of limits. Most often, it's 4 or 5 years. On occasion, I've seen it out as long as 10. I think actually Halton Region has a 10-year policy. So if that was something that you'd like to consider, that's obviously something we could consider as part of the bylaw.
Well, and I think, and if I may, Mr. Hanson, I think it goes to our asset management plan, and of course the life cycling that we're going to include within our asset management plan. For those folks that are very interested in this, I'm sure, one of the things the city of Port Colborne is doing is taking its assets and really ensuring that the life cycle of those assets are sustainable. So at the end of the day, based on that, and the expectation that who would pay for that, I think is the key issue here, is that when we look at our asset management plan, you know, does the current resident pay it over time? Now, 10 years, I think I would have an opinion on that, because when you look at roads, for example, or even water, wastewater, more importantly, you're stretching 30, 40, 50, 60 years down the road. So I think that has to fall into this discussion as well, based on what those development charges should be realistically, and it goes to Councillor Elliott's point with respect to should they be charged now? Should they be spread over, instead of 10 years or 5 years, actually 20, 30, 40 years, especially when it comes to water, wastewater? So I think those questions are going to have to be asked and answered during when the report's presented to council, to get a more realistic view of what charges can or should be actually added to a new development, or more importantly, to a development that might occur on a piece of property that housed a building at one time.
Redevelopment versus new development, so to
Exactly,
speak.
exactly, especially in areas that don't have that infrastructure that was placed there years prior.
And you have policies within, like, such as the downtown core and those areas, so CIP, I mean, there's reductions in that. So those, I guess the charges that we have would have to be measured relative to those reductions, because if you already do a reduction, is then those CIP areas, are we doing a reduction on a reduction? So normally I allow the CIPs to be a little more proactive in those areas, and then to make those appropriate charges, so changes.
Thank you. Members of council, any further questions or comments? Councillor Bodner?
Just one comment on maybe Councillor Elliott's opinion on 5 years versus longer for, you know, development charges. That kind of goes into the land banking thing too. If somebody, you know, if somebody wants to grab a good corner and sit on it for 10 years hoping it'll go up, versus somebody that may want to just take it and think, well, I got 5 years to get a building on there. You know, it may or may not play into their thinking, but, you know, we've always talked about land banking being a bad thing. Mind you, 20 years we're talking about for some of those subdivisions or more. You know, just a thought on that too.
Thank you, Councillor. Members of council, any further questions or comments? We're going to ask now for oral presentations or comments or questions from members of the public. Members of the public, are there any questions or comments? If you want to come on up, state your name and your address, and of course proceed from there. Mr. Timms, we actually have two brothers in the audience today, I see. Roy and Bruce. Did you want to come and join them, Bruce? Roy, welcome. It's great to have you out.
Thank you, Your Worship.
If you just want to press the button there, Roy, you're live.
Right. Thank you, Your Worship. Also with me tonight is one of your former councillors, Dominic Orsini. I'm the current chair of the Niagara Industrial Association, and Dominic's one of our board members. So when we heard about this topic tonight, we thought we would come and give you our points of view. And I do have some copies here which I can circulate. I might be short one or two, but we can email them through to you tomorrow. So we thank you for this opportunity of being in front of you tonight. The Niagara Industrial Association was created about 7 years ago. We represent 190 manufacturers and their service industries in the region of Niagara. And we've always participated in the development charge issue throughout the region over that period of time. Just for general information, currently the cities of St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, Welland, and Fort Erie have no development charges for industry and manufacturing. 2 years ago, the region of Niagara considered increasing their development charges from $2.20 a square foot to $5.16 a square foot. The Niagara Industrial Association became very active in that process. And the region at that time, really in part to the leadership of your representatives here, your mayor and your regional councillor, David Barrick, the region approved the 2-year moratorium on regional development charges, effective January 18th, 2013. So it's being reconsidered again this fall. The development charge moratorium was implemented as a grant on qualifying industrial developments in the amount of the development charge that normally would have been incurred. So in other words, there is no industrial development charge in the region now. And I know that to a large extent has been the case in Port Colborne over the last few years too, and of course we think that's a great policy, but I think there's also a major payback to you and to the taxpayer. In April of this year, regional staff submitted a report to the Regional Development Charge Policy Task Force, and I guess it was an update on what had happened in 2013. And there were 19 development charge industrial grant applications approved and building permits issued. That's throughout the region. In total, the region granted $540,943 in industrial development charge grants. These 19 industrial projects resulted in construction of 853 square feet of new manufacturing space throughout the region. The total value was estimated at $19,123,000, and it was estimated that 173 jobs were created. Of that 19 million, it was interesting that 37% was for pure industrial manufacturing. A substantial amount, like $4.5 million, went into new wineries, which really is classified as manufacturing, and 39.2% went into some wind turbines that somehow qualified under the Act as manufacturing. But I think the most important part was that when you look at MPAC and what will do to increase the assessed value of property taxes, you probably would benefit. The region will get $247,000 of yearly income and property tax off of these manufacturing investments. And so just looking at that, it would take a 2-year payback roughly. But at the same time, the municipality would be enjoying, like the local municipality would be enjoying another $205,000, basically $206,000 of industrial tax. So it's almost a 1-year payback. So that's really pretty exceptional in the business world. So I think it's a very good policy that hopefully the region will continue with, and that local municipalities such as yours will continue with. Also, interestingly enough, when the region was considering doing this, we surveyed our membership, and I've given you some of the results were, and obviously our membership weren't very impressed by large increases in industrial development charges. And they expressed that in their return, and you've got that in your report. So I don't think I'll waste your time tonight on that, but Our understanding is that the purpose of development charges is to recover the municipality's spending for water and wastewater and infrastructure based on future growth forecasts. Industrial growth is considerably different from non-industrial growth such as residential and commercial, especially in Niagara. Residential and non-industrial growth is continuous. Even in this tough economic time, new subdivisions and new commercial construction continues. There are no abandoned, built-out subdivisions for residential use. There aren't that many abandoned commercial buildings or malls throughout the region. On the other hand, there are millions of square feet of empty, demolished, or underutilized industrial buildings in Niagara. I think there's actually over 2,000 acres of serviced industrial land that currently isn't being used in Niagara. So these plants were serviced by roads, water, sanitary sewers, treatment plants, etc. Consequently, industrially speaking, Niagara's infrastructure should have plenty of capacity to absorb new industrial development. I mean, the sewage plants were there to treat these facilities. Now the facilities aren't there, the sewage plants are still here. We may need larger sewage plants, but it's not to service industrial, it's to service residential and commercial. For many years, the new infrastructure required for the forecasted growth in Niagara should not consider industry until the inventory of past capacity is absorbed by industrial expansion. And we can all name many plants throughout the region that are closed and the land is currently sitting empty. For the forecasted non-industrial growth in Niagara to occur, we will need jobs, employment that industry creates. Therefore, we need to encourage, not discourage, industrial growth. Respectfully, we ask you to continue with your current policies and the policies of your neighboring municipalities and keep industrial charges to a minimum, preferably zero, as they are in the area at the moment. We also suggest that really any income that you might have had over the recent years from industrial development has been minimal. That's been the case throughout the region. So we're really not giving up a lot of money to make this effort to attract investment. Other North American municipalities experiencing industrial difficulties have less or no industrial development charges and often offer other incentives. Port Colborne and the region have significant reserves of unused, underutilized industrial infrastructure resulting from the significant contraction of our industry. So really, we're asking you to continue with the policy you currently have. In the report, we've listed, there were about 20-odd comments that came from the respondents to our survey that was 2 years old. And a lot of them expressed frustration with the situation in Niagara. So we just thought you might find them interesting as the points of view that manufacturing has had. We are redoing our survey this month, and we will be resubmitting to the region, encouraging them to maintain their moratorium on industrial development charges, and that'll happen in the fall. And again, I just want to thank you for listening to us today and encourage you to continue with your existing policy.
Thank you, Mr. Timms. Well done. Members of council, are there any questions or comments to the presenter? Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Timms, you heard me ask Mr. Aquilina earlier to clarify that our current policy is no industrial development charges for any industry who expands over 5,000 square feet. We don't charge any. Mr. Aquilina clarified that for everybody, that there's no industrial development payment. So
Right.
did you see anything else that we could do as far as for encouragement for industry?
Councillor Kenny, before I ask the presenter to answer that, if I can have Mr. Aquilino clarify?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our industrial CAP actually has 0 development charges.
Zero.
2 feet, square feet, 20 square feet, 100 square feet, 100,000 square feet, 0.
Zero.
We have no development charges
Yeah,
here for
no.
industry, as well as the region, so.
Right.
Mr. Timms?
You know, I think I'm encouraged with what the region and the municipalities are doing now. The local economic development offices, including Port Colborne's, are working really well with the region. The region's economic development office is really relatively new, as it has been restructured, and they've just finished hiring their last staff there. So I think continue to work with the region as a team, and I think the region, and the region is beginning to do this. We need to actively promote the Gateway Economic Zone that is a big part of, you know, Port Colborne's future and really South Niagara's future. We need to make sure that the region actively promotes it. Because, you know, 2 years ago, development charges were eliminated in the region. I think it really only started getting promoted about 6 to 7 months ago. So we just need to work better as a team to promote the literature, to get the message out there that Niagara, and in your case, Port Colborne in particular, is open for business and welcomes manufacturing and industry. And the public need to give you can't, you know, it's going to take a couple of years for this to happen. It doesn't just, you know, it's not like a water tap. You can't just turn it on and shut it off. So the message has to get out there.
Thank you, Mr. Timms, well stated. Members of council, any further questions or comments? If I can just add, Councillor Kenny, to that, and you've been a part of it forever, for many years, and just to along the same lines as Mr. Timms, with not only the development charges and the waiving of same, but the incentive packages that we've established that Mr. Aquilino touched on earlier. Mr. Aquilino, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was one important program that I did not include, and that's the tax increment financing that not only does our industrial CIP have in place, but also our brownfield CIP, and as well the region's gateway CIP.
That's right. And as well as was correctly noted, is the available lands that we just established, the industrial lands that we just established along the 140, not just in Port Colborne, but that whole 140 corridor that actually Mr. Timms happens to be a part of with his office and his lands, but as well ensuring that over time it gets serviced. The hundreds of acres of service land between Port and Welland, between East Main and East Main, and other parts of the region. But I think Mr. Timms touched on one of the most important is getting the word out to ensure that we actually package this, not just as a city, but as 12 cities, a region, and of course bring that out to market with respect to all the advantages of developing here. And then of course everything else goes along with that, like the foreign trade zone policies that's established at the federal level, the places to grow policies that are established at the provincial level, and of course with that, supply chain, educational institutions, and last but not yet least is of course our location too. So packaging that and getting out to market with respect to a proper marketing strategy is just as important, so that people recognize what we have to offer. With no further comments or questions, Mr. Timms, well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
To members of the public, are there any further questions or comments? Yes, sir. If you want to come on up and state your name and address and comments. Do you want to press the green button, sir? And you're good to go.
Okay. My name is Frank Memmi, and I live at 51067 Deeks Road South in Wainfleet. I've got laryngitis, so I'm going to be a little bit difficult to hear. My wife warned me not to come here tonight, but I did anyhow. And as she said, if you do, make sure you keep your hands under your seat. So, all right, development charges. We here in Niagara Peninsula are living in a depressed economy. And we've been living in a depressed economy for a number of years now. the number of units that are being built in the Niagara Peninsula, not just in Port Colborne or St. Catharines or Welland or wherever, it used to be around 2,300 housing units. We're down now to less than 1,000. And it's been like that for a number of years. And I'm sure that your staff knows that. So our industry has left. And we're not doing much to encourage new industry to come in. Years ago, look at the city of Guelph. It just exploded. Why? Because they encouraged industry to come in and create jobs where people earned X number of dollars and not just minimum jobs or jobs that are meaningless and they're just part-time. So it's up to the councils and the cities and the region in the Niagara Peninsula to get this area out of the doldrums that we've fallen into. We're missing something. And it all has to do with jobs, and it all has to do with costs. And it's very easy to follow. A couple of years ago, Wainfleet introduced new development charges. They never had development charges before. And they said that if the pressure, it's for the pressure that new development puts on the city, or in the township in this case. And I stood for 45 minutes in front of them. And I told them why they should not charge development charges. Because any reason that they gave, or their consultant gave, were totally against the intent of development charges. But of course, they didn't listen. The only reason that they had, real reason that they had, to start with the $6,500 a house development charges was everybody else does it. Well, it's very easy to follow, not easy to lead. And so I think that put a challenge to any council in the Niagara region and say, we want to encourage people to come down here. We want to encourage business. We want to encourage industrial development. No development charges. It's not a must, it's a choice. And so that is the only thing that's going to make this Niagara Peninsula more prosperous, and it's going to encourage good jobs, and it's going to encourage good business down here, as well as good families that come down and buy homes and make the area prosper. The average cost in Canada right now of a home is over $400,000. The average cost in the Niagara Peninsula is $375,000. The average cost in Toronto is between $550,000 and $600,000. People can't afford that. People in the Niagara Peninsula can afford maybe $250,000. We can't produce a home for $250,000, a decent home. And development charges is part of that cost. And never mind about the interference with the building codes. Every so often they revise the building codes, and then they add another $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000 to the cost of homes, in the spirit of saving 10 cents worth of energy and spending like $5,000, $6,000, and $7,000 each time that the development charge or the building code changes. It's ridiculous. And so I would just challenge you to start a program of leadership and not a program of following the program of followers, being followers and following others.
Thank you,
Are
Mr.
there any
Remy.
questions?
Any questions, members of council? Councilor Bonner.
Well, maybe not a question, but, and I don't want to start a family feud, but I think your wife should encourage you to come out and you give a very good presentation. And, you know, compared to some we see here, that's very good. While I may not agree with everything that you say, and I might, but I encourage you to come out and throw your 2 cents in anytime you like.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or comments? The only comment that I want to make, Mr. Memme, is that you validate the direction that we've been taking for the past few years, as outlined by Mr. Timms, with no development charges, the incentive packages, and trying to create those jobs and get industry here. So what you're saying, we're doing, and you validated that within your presentation. I thank you for that.
I hope so. Thank you.
Mr. Pinelli. Welcome. You're on. It was on. Now it's on. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, staff, and members of the public. I have a number of concerns, but the main item that I had on my agenda, I believe Bill Steele and Councillor Bill Steele and Mr. Barrett might have taken my thunder away. I also felt that possibly having planning staff review how much we are collecting in terms of impost fees as opposed to how much we are losing in terms of taxes, et cetera, et cetera. There must be a break-even point. So hopefully staff will look at that. I have 2 concerns. One was with the report that was presented. And correct me if I'm wrong, and I may very well be, but I do recall in high school, driving down Highway 58, there used to be a sign that said, City of Port Colborne, population 21,900 people. I'm pretty sure that was the case. Now the population is 19,200. So I'm going to dismiss this growth forecast. I think that report is totally wrong. I do agree with the previous speaker that said Niagara is a very depressed area. I'll go one step further. I think Port Colborne and the southern tier of Niagara Peninsula is extremely depressed. I commend council for their efforts towards industrial and eliminating the development charges on industrial. I think that's a very wise idea, although I do have some concerns about that. I believe I heard the planner say that even up to 100 square feet, industrial is exempt. As you know, we are in the midst of trying to propose a fairly large residential development in terms of Port Colborne, large, which is far exceeds a 5,000 square foot or 10,000 square foot industrial complex. So I would like to be considered, or developments like that, to be residential industrial. We, on the same hand, are bringing tax money, families, and development to this region. So we're being penalized while, say, an equivalent size industrial firm, although I'm glad to see them come, is not. That was the main gist of my explanation tonight. The other concern I had is that this report, I don't believe differentiates between infilling of lots and lots that are in a new subdivision. And what I mean by that is an infilling, they already have the roads there, the sewers are already there, et cetera, et cetera. So why would, not that I have any infilled lots, I don't, but why would someone build a home there and pay the same fees as someone who's going to have to build roads, sewers, water, et cetera, et cetera? If we're going to encourage development, then we better start looking at this. The last time I applied for a building permit, which was about a year ago, and I'm saying the total fees, not the city fee, but the total fee, I was unbelievable, came back at $21,000. And this is for a 1,400 square foot bungalow. The gentleman that was here before me speaking said it best. In Niagara, it's hard for us as builders to come up with a house for $250,000, plus put in all the services. Very, very difficult. So I ask council to please have a look at this. The other concern I have an email here. I believe I sent this out. I forgot that my office sent this out. This is from the City of St. Catharines Building Department. It was copied to our planner, to you, Mr. Mayor, and to Mr. Bodner. I believe I sent it out to everybody. I hope I did. And I was very surprised that this was the case. Attached, you will find the regional development charges. This email will also confirm that the City of St. Catharines no longer has municipal development charges, period. That's one thing. Now, I've heard the word redevelopment applies in St. Catharines. It has to also apply in Port Colborne. My one parent is in a retirement home in St. Catharines. On that corner are all brand new homes. That developer had the luxury of not having to pay development charges. We in Port Colborne are at a disadvantage. I also wish to point out to council, and I would like to see implemented in our bylaw, in our development bylaw, what the City of Pelham has done, which I believe makes a lot of sense and has encouraged phenomenal growth in that city. And if you just give me a second here, I'll try to pull it up. Excuse me, 1 second, I want to read it. This is from the City of Pelham. And what they do, and this would apply more to my case specifically as opposed to many, many areas. Services in lieu. They're saying, okay, we realize you have to put in a road and services, et cetera, et cetera. They're giving back their portion of the development charges to the principals, so that the road, for example, wouldn't have to be paid for twice. That's the whole extent of this, the whole meaning of this. And I think they've hit the mark. And I think City of Port Colborne should not be behind them. We should be right up front. They do not exceed the costs of the road. They give it back towards the road, or water, or sanitary sewer. I think it's a good idea. I would encourage this council to review it and implement it. Thank you for allowing me this time, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Pinelli. Members of council, are there any questions or comments? Once again, thank you for your time. Members of the public, are there any questions further or comments that you would like to make? With none, Mr. Scanlon, do you want to continue? Explanation of future meetings, or Dan, did you want to take care of that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What we heard earlier is we're going to collect all the information, bring a report back to council, address all the questions that we heard tonight, all the comments that have been from the public as well, the questions that are to council, and we will bring forward a report to the last meeting in August. That is our goal.
Great, thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Members of council, with no further business, no further questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this portion of tonight's agenda. Councillor Bodnar, Councillor Doucette, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. I'll just take a 2-minute recess so we can regroup here. If I may now, members of council, I'm now going to call to order the Committee of the Whole portion of this evening's agenda. And I'll ask the clerk to introduce any addendum items she may have.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None this evening.
Thank you, Ashley. Members of council, if I can have a motion to confirm the agenda, please. Councillor Danch, Councillor Doucette, are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4 on the agenda, as the applicant is a relative of mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bodnar. Further conflicts? You're all right? Okay. With no further conflicts, and as noted by the clerk, we'll now ask members of council what items they'd like to have separated and have separate discussion on. I have Councillor Butters, Kenny, and Elliott, possibly. Councillor Butters.
I'd like item number 4, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butters. Councillor Kenny?
Item 1, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. You're okay? Any further items, members? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Members, I'm now going to ask for a motion to approve the remainder of the items, please. Councillor Butters, seconder, Councillor Bodnar. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. There are no presentations this evening. However, we do have some delegations, and we're going to start off with Mr. Carmen D'Angelo, who I believe is going to be introduced by Mr. Mark Bagu. We're going to bring Mark up here and get him first. Mark, welcome. And Mark, as members of council know, he is a member of the board of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, and he is going to introduce our guests here this evening. Mark, welcome as always.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. This is not too many Bagus come up to this stage anymore, I don't think, eh? But this is probably my first.
My question is, when are you going to be behind this horseshoe?
This is probably my first and last time up here, I think.
That answers
But
it.
you guys do such a great job. You don't need me up there. Mayor Badaway, City Councilors, Regional Councilor Barrick, City staff, and citizens of the audience. I'd like to introduce first the Chairman of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, Mr. Bruce Timms, Regional Councilor Timms. He came for his support today. And for the presentation, our new, actually, CAO/Secretary Treasurer of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, Mr. Carmen D'Angelo. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bagu. Mr. D'Angelo, welcome. It's great to have you out.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. It's my pleasure to present to you the NPCA 2014-2017 strategic plan. Okay. There we go. All right. So I'm going to introduce the strategic plan. I'm going to give you a bit of a background of who we are, what we do, and then go into our process of our strategic plan, and then get right into some of the nuts and bolts of the strategic plan. I respect your time of 10 minutes, so I might go past quickly some of the slides. It's a 15-minute presentation, so I'm going to condense it to about 10. So who we are, if you look at it, we're all of the region of Niagara, a portion of the city of Hamilton, and a portion of Haldimand County. I'm not good at this. Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we are approximately over 2,400 square kilometers, and again, 21% city of Hamilton, 25% of Haldimand County. We have a board of directors of 12 members from Niagara Region, 2 from the City of Hamilton, and 1 from Haldimand County. When we look at it, we have 37 conservation areas representing over 7,200 acres, and we just added some recent land acquisition programs. In March, we added 15 acres to our lakefront property in Wainfleet. We added 24 acres in expansion of Balls Falls, and in this fall, we're going to actually receive ownership of St. John's Conservation Center. We have a really robust land acquisition program. We receive annual funding, $500,000 per annum from the region and $100,000 per annum from the City of Hamilton. We use that to target priority properties in our land acquisition program. What we do in terms of our watershed management, when it comes to construction permit approvals, development reviews, water quality restoration programs, our infrastructure programs, such as we have 3 dams that we operate, and recently added source water protection on our water side of the business. In our operations side, we do project management, again, those 37 conservation areas. We have some quite exciting recreational programs that we do, and our conservation programs. What we did in last year is we created a new corporate services department, and that is to support both watershed and operations, where we establish a new communications division, marketing, community relations. Our mapping, we moved over to corporate services, and accounting and administration. We have an overall budget of about $11.4 million. 8.8 is in our operating and 2.5 in our capital budget. And we do this with 54.5 FTEs, with quite a complement of seasonal and summer students. How we're funded, if you look, our primary funding comes from the region of Niagara at $7.2 million. We get about $500,000 from the City of Hamilton and approximately around $85,000 from Haldimand County. I point to your attention 2 pie graphics, and one is our user fees at $1.4 million. What we're trying to do with our parks programs to be self-sustainable, that it's cost revenue neutral, that our user fees pays for the parking. We rely less, put less pressure on the municipal levy. And our foundation, it's a modest at $81,000 last year. We're looking to reorganize our foundation to attract more funding opportunities for those who want to donate to the NPCA. So our strategic plan process. You'll see there's 10 steps in our strategic plan process. What can I tell you to highlight it without going through each step is that we went to the public 4 different opportunities to get some citizen engagement and tell us what they feel the NPCA should do. So what we did was we went to our town hall meetings. We got a sense from our various stakeholders of how we're doing. We then regrouped, took those comments. We hired a consultant. We went back to the public in terms of working groups. Those who attended our town hall meetings, we invited them to participate on working groups. We then put together a draft plan. Then we went back and did some town hall meetings saying, okay, this is what we heard. This is the product, our draft plan. Now we got further comment on that. And then our 4th step of community engagement is prior to finalizing. When we had our board discussion, we invited the public to give us some further comments on our strategic plan. And I'm at step 10, where I'm now communicating our strategic plan to our various funding municipalities, the region, City of Hamilton, Haldimand County, and now I'm going to the 12 local municipalities and presenting our strategic plan. I've done the City of Welland, and you're number 2, City of Port Colborne.
Actually, we're number 1.
Just timing of your meetings. There's nothing reference to that. Thank you for the comment, though. Now, we also did a parallel process. So as we were doing our strategic plan, we had to align our staff in order to meet the goals of that strategic plan. So in some areas, we're doing extremely well, but in other areas, we're missing the gap when we did our town hall meetings. So what we did is we have a very talented group of young professionals at the NPCA and some veterans. And what we did was with our biologists or ecologists or engineers. We want to reorganize them so they best are positioned to meet those gaps that we had identified. And so as we're doing our strategic plan, we also engaged in a process of doing a staff realignment. We wanted to make sure the 2 points I wanted to highlight on is clear lines of responsibilities. That's why we created a corporate services department in order to avoid duplication of effort and primarily our focus on customer service delivery. Our challenge is, I point to our deliverables, to be pragmatic, customer-friendly service and refocus our mandate. I'll talk about our mandate. But when I talk about pragmatic, customer-friendly service, it's that when someone comes with a proposal, that we look at it and that we have permissive regulation. It's been defined. So when someone comes, if it doesn't meet our regulation, is there something we can do to help get it into the regulation? So before we say no, what we do is we work with the proposal and trying to see if there's any mitigation efforts we can in order to help the project. At the end of the day, if we exhausted all that, then we're in a position of not issuing a permit, but we really focus on our pragmatic, customer-friendly service. And if you look at our mandate as identified in the legislation is the conservation, restoration, development, and management of our natural resources. And so we had a bit of what you call some mandate drift. We drifted away from that mandate. So now what we've done is we've refocused our mandate with going true to the legislation and trying to hit those 4 pillars, again, of the conservation, restoration, development, and management. In addition, you can see a list of added responsibilities via the legislation that we're working with. So this brings us to our mission to manage our watershed's natural resources by balancing environmental, community, and economic needs. Again, when we face an issue, we look at it as a balanced approach. We have a variety of stakeholders. Sometimes they're polarized views. What our job is and our mission is trying to find a balanced approach and trying to respect those different views. Our vision, again, we highlight the term balancing our conservation and sustainable development for future generations. We do this by looking at these values, and I'll just hit on a couple of those, but one, when we're doing our town hall meetings, the issue of transparency, accountability, and quality of services kept rising, and so that's what we do. We go, when we're meeting with people, we give them full disclosure. And for our staff, creating a work environment that's respectful to their professional development. So when you look at our strategic plan and our goals, we transform our organizational culture. We wanted a culture of our staff that's pragmatic, that treats people who come to us as customers, that we give them full disclosure, that we have greater accountability in terms to our board on what we're doing in terms of our performance measures, that we have sustainable infrastructure management. Our parks, we have 4 generating 4 parks that generate revenue. Its infrastructure has declined, and now we are at a challenge of redeveloping our infrastructure to make it sustainable for years to come. Improve our performance development approval process. So we were stagnant at times in terms of our permit approvals. We put more resources into our permit approvals with more talented staff, and now we're tracking our performance measures. Before, we couldn't tell you how long it took to process a permit, but now we're tracking that data and we're collating it in order to develop a dashboard of performance measures. And effective policies and priorities framework. So this is a bulk, and this is the tough work that's ahead of us. We have our mission, we have our vision. Now we have to relook at all our policies in order to match that balanced approach. So we've done quite a few things to date. As per our strategic plan, we hired a communication specialist to have a better rapport with their community and our stakeholders. We centralized our volunteer coordination. We created a community and marketing division. In terms of our development approval process, we increased our number of planners from 2 to 4. We're looking at tracking via the region's IDART system. We established some performance measures for reviews. And most importantly, when a proponent comes, what we saw in the past is they first had to go to the region, then they'd have to go to the local municipality, then they had to come to the NPCA, then maybe possibly they had to go to the NEC. So we saw that a proponent of a project would have to go to various agencies to get their permit approvals. We are a signature of the region's Memorandum of Understanding, such as the City of Port Colborne, where we focus on the pre-consultation meetings. We want to get the proponent in front of all the agencies all at the same time, so the proponent knows what are the challenges ahead and what permits are required, rather than have to go from one agency to the other. Our asset management, we hired a project manager to guide us through our infrastructure development and our project management. Our restoration programs, we have a very award-winning and talented group of restoration programs, and our people who work there, we want them to refocus. We don't want them to plant the trees, we want them to plan to plant the trees. And so it's, you know, they like to have their boots to the ground, which is good, but because of we're stretched in resources, we want to prioritize, get the funding in order to do our restoration programs. Our policies, again, I talked a little bit about revamping our policies and our governance. Most importantly, I bring to your attention our governance. We hired a community liaison coordinator. When we went and did our strategic plan, we had a lot of momentum. We got a lot of feedback from our stakeholders. We re-engaged them after our strategic plan was approved, and we don't want to lose that momentum. So we formed a community liaison advisory committee. We hired someone to guide that committee, and so we continuously hear. We just don't stop now. We continuously hear from our stakeholders and our community representatives. And so we have a lot to do. In front of you, you have a package of our strategic plan. We have a lot of stuff to do. In essence of time, I won't go over that. But our ask here today with our municipalities, we ask you to continue being our partner. City of Port Colborne is a good partner with the NPCA. If we have a lot of volunteer opportunities, we would welcome if you forward volunteers our way. We ask that you participate in our Community Liaison Advisory Committee, dialogue with our board members, and come visit our parks. It's a great place to come bring your family. If you have someone getting married, Balls Falls is a great place to get married at, and use our Center for Conservation for meetings. Thank you for
Mr. D'Angelo, well
the
done.
opportunity.
Members of council, are there any questions or comments? Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great words. Something I really wanted to hear tonight, that there is, you know, a new outlook. I think having sat around this horseshoe for a few years, and knowing you have good people on the board, I know 3 of them sitting here right now, there's, you know, okay, the Niagara Plains Conservation Authority has been perceived in the past to be kind of a pain in the ass to developers. And I'll say it like that there was some disconnect or some stumbling block when they got to there. I'm not saying that was true necessarily, but I'm glad to hear that there is a recognition that some things had to change, some things either need to be smoothed out or communicated better. And that's exactly what you're saying. So proof is in the pudding, and you know, hopefully this is all true and all good, and we can, you know, everybody's on board, and I commend you for what has been implemented and the board. I think it's a step in the right direction, and look forward to hearing some good results as we go along.
Great, thank you, Councillor Bodnar. Further questions or comments? Just on Councillor Bodnar's question or comments, with respect to the slide that shows the municipal contributions, and I bring this up for council's information. It shows here that municipalities, the taxpayers of Niagara, quite frankly, are paying $7.2 million to to the MPCA, to Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, in comparison to $513,000 by Hamilton and $82,000 by Haldeman. So just for clarification for council's benefit, why is that? What is it based on? What's the actual assessment? There's a pretty big gap there between 7.2 million and 513,000 in Hamilton and 82,000 in Haldeman. So exactly what is that assessment based on?
Okay, thank you for the question. Our three funding municipalities being the Region of Niagara, City of Hamilton, and Haldeman County, my understanding is historically, when they established the funding formula, it was based on population, an estimated population growth, and also geography of where people are residing and where there's growth. So right now, it would be time that there might be a
That was my next question.
Okay. At this time, when you look at our watershed and we look at where our growth is happening, predominantly most of our growth is in Bimbrook in the city of Hamilton, and quite a bit of an expansion of the population there. So we would have to take a look at it, look at apportionment, and then determine what is the balance of the funding formula. That is how the province and right across our conservation authorities across Ontario, that's how they establish their funding.
Great, thank you. And notwithstanding the questions I asked you at Regional Council, I'll leave that because that was already done and taken care of. But I do want to say well done tonight. I think as Councillor Bodner alluded to, the message is loud and clear. I think Dan's over there welcoming that message, because I know in the past the relationship can somewhat be strained between municipalities and the MPCA, but I think that's changing. And I give yourself credit as well as equally as important as members of the board, led by Councillor Timms, formerly I believe Councillor Maves, and as well as your staff. There's a few members here this evening as well. So good on you guys, well done, and we appreciate working with you well into the future. Great job.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Connor. Members of council, if I can have a motion to receive the presentation, please. Councillor Steele, Councillor Kenny, any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. I'm now going to call upon Cynthia Skinner. Cynthia, welcome once again, Friends of Port Colborne Lighthouses, with respect to the proclamation request for Lighthouse Day, August 9th, 2014. Welcome.
Thank you. Mayor Badaway, councillors, thank you for your continued support of our Lighthouse group. It was only a couple weeks ago that our archivist, Dr. Michelle Vosberg, alerted me to an item in the Great Lakes History newsletter, namely Lighthouse Day. That is all that was needed to spur us to join this bandwagon at the local level. Last Monday, Fort Erie Council passed HELP's request for August 9th to be declared their Lighthouse Day. We are here tonight hopeful of having this council see the value of declaring the same. With so little lead time, we plan to offer tours from 1 to 5 on the 9th. A lighthouse flag has been ordered. Next year, we hope to expand this event with more souvenirs. We have been invited to visit Buffalo on the 10th when they celebrate, and are welcome to hand out our information then about our tours. Their tower, like ours, is climbable. The next Saturday from that is International Ham Radio Operators Day, when the hams broadcast from as many lighthouses worldwide as possible. It would be nice for this event to also include our lighthouses in the future. Lighthouses worldwide are amongst the top tourist draws. One visitor who came to Port Abano from Germany said that this was his 1,000th lighthouse to visit. My Navy retired cousins spend part of each summer exploring the different sections of the Great Lakes shores and their lighthouses. International Lighthouse Day is decades old, recognized this summer on the Great Lakes on the 9th of August. We seem to be the first two cities on the northern shore to join this tribute to our maritime history. Just today, Erno Rossi, our captain, got the green light for our tours. And with the weather cooperating tomorrow morning, my cousins will be here and they'll be the very first visitors of the season. And we hope that those of you who have not yet seen our lighthouse will come either for Canal Days or on Lighthouse Day. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Cynthia, well done. Now, I am going to give Erno, I see you sitting there very patiently. I'm going to give you an opportunity here to really plug your event for this weekend during Canal Days. So for all those folks watching on COGECO, they'll know exactly what you're doing, what times you're going to be actually allowing for tours, et cetera. So come on forward. I know you weren't expecting it, but I like putting you on the spot. Just like you used to do to all your students.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I hope my former students don't throw their books and pencils at me now. Yeah, we've just today got permission to do this. You come to understand that when you have to get involved with permissions from different parts of the federal government, that there's more friction between the different parts of the federal government than there are between political parties. But maybe it's the same thing, I don't know. But anyway, today it finally came through that, yes, we can take tourists out to the lighthouses and raise the funds to restore the two lighthouses to their prime condition many years ago. And what we do is set up at the marina, and people say, which marina? Wow. You got more than one marina and you forget. But yes, the Sugarloaf Harbor Marina, we set up there in the pavilion and sell tickets to interested parties to ride out to the lighthouse, usually in the Pocomar, and they're thrilled for several reasons. It's the first time they've seen their rescue boat, and there they are riding in it at no cost. And then they're enjoying the two lighthouses that haven't been open to the public since last year for the first time in 110 years. So it's a special thrill that way. We charge, and they say, why so cheap? And we charge $25 for a family. That's 2 adults. We don't question anything else if they're adults and they claim to be a family. And they have many children up to 12 years of age. For $25 for the 2 adults, and children are free up to 12 years of age. Slight sum for between 12 and 18, slight additional sum, insignificant really. And anything beyond that is an single adult fee of $19. 19, I guess it is, dollars. So that if a person shows up, sorry, it's $15. So if a person shows up by him or herself and is an adult, the single fee is $15. And last year we had a very good turnout. We hope the good weather we had last year will reoccur soon for us this coming weekend. So come out and enjoy, and I think you'll really like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Erno. Any questions or comments, members of council? Councillor Danch?
Great job, love the lighthouse. Just a question, if you were a boater and you had your boat out there, is there somebody that's going to be at the lighthouse where they could maybe tie up their own personal watercraft and go on, or do you want everyone to start out at the marina and do it that way? Good question.
It would be up to the boater to decide whether he could tie up there safely. We don't provide landing spots, no. But I see sailboats tie up and anchor off and put the front of the sailboat close to the lighthouse. And other people with small, I bring out my own small boat and tie it up beside the lighthouse because I go early in the morning and get set up. And there, the first morning last year was a group of Korean men sitting in a circle on the lighthouse, beside the lighthouse, with a Chinese guide from Toronto, and they were eating the fish that they had caught already for breakfast and cooking their rice in there. And the first thing I asked them, I said, "How long you be here?" And they said, "Just for breakfast." And I said, "That's fine. You can stay till 11 o'clock. Then lots of people come. So best if you're not here 11 o'clock." And that was quite a few hours later. But the first thing the Chinese fellow said to me, he said, you rent for fishing the lighthouse?" I said, "Geez, no one thought of that, you know." and I said, "Maybe next year. Yeah, talk to me next year." But anyway, Any other questions?
Thanks, Erno. Councillor Elliott.
Mr. Rossi, if you could just tell us days and times.
Friday.
Days. Friday, yep, go ahead. You can tell everybody, make sure the camera gets you and
Friday.
let everybody know.
Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And if you don't like crowds, come Friday and come Monday. It's not as crowded and you can be whisked back and forth quite easily. Same price, of course.
Timer?
From 11 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. We will transport you to a far, far better place. Anything else?
Members of council, further questions, comments? But done, or no, thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
Members, if I can, by the way, as I said earlier, we do have a proclamation that will be delivered during the council portion of tonight's agenda. All here, set to go. Members of council, mover and seconder to accept the presentation, please. Councillor Demeray, Councillor Doucette, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. What are you grinning at, Councillor Elliott? What are you up to? Members, we're now going to move on to the mayor's report, and I do have a small report here for you. As you had heard and had been passed information on, the Trillium Railway Group has proposed a Niagara Rail Trail transit spine for the region of Niagara. And as many of you are aware, the City of Port Colborne continues to have a proactive working relationship with Trillium Railway, their principals as well as their employees, and of course their business strategy, since bringing them on board as our short line operator over a decade ago. Back, I believe, in the late 90s, early 2000s is when they were brought aboard. Throughout the past, we have included Trillium in many discussions, as you well know, including but not limited to the Economic Gateway Center and zone strategy, as well as the implementation process and economic development in general, and of course, transportation. While speaking with Karen Ettinger of Trillium this past week, she has outlined a potential public-private partnership between the Niagara region and Trillium Railway to develop a Niagara rail transit spine along Trillium Railway's track from Port Colborne to the city of St. Catharines, with a connection at the CN main line in Meryton, the proposed line for Niagara's GO train service. Ms. Ettinger forwarded correspondence to myself that outlines a potential partnership, including key benefits, and she correctly, members of council, she correctly identifies and notes that a partnership such as this would accomplish the following. As you know, it would definitely add a needed intermunicipal transit network that connects Niagara region to the proposed GO train service, making GO train service accessible to a larger number of Niagara's residents. Secondly, it provides a direct north-south route for Niagara's residents to access key employers for job opportunities. It provides Niagara employers with access to a larger labor force, labor pool, skilled workforce that we have here and is abundant throughout the Niagara region. It provides enhanced St. Catharines to Port Colborne tourism and event transit options. Currently, for example, right now, guys, you know, let's face it, folks come down the canal days, for example, and they could take the GO into St. Catharines. How do they get from St. Catharines to Port Colborne? So again, something that's a key objective and a key advantage. Significant enhancement to both intermunicipal, local, as well as regional transit. Supports Niagara's Grow South strategy by enhancing transit links to Central and South Niagara. It creates new development opportunities, residential, commercial, and industrial, as we heard about earlier, and clusters around the Niagara region transit service stops. It maintains the viability of critical short line rail service, which is key, to Trillium's 20 existing customers. And finally, it improves the intermunicipal transit ridership experience within Niagara, not just buses, but also trains, and of course other. Last week, I did forward a copy of Ms. Ettinger's proposal to Niagara Regional, for the Niagara Regional Transit Spine to members of Regional Council, as well as staff, with a request that the Niagara region work with Trillium Railway to assess this opportunity as part of the intermunicipal transit study. This would, as well, members of council, also connect GO Rail and bring it into the south part of the region, utilizing Trillium's railway. At last Thursday evening's regional council meeting, the region did in fact respond by ensuring that this initiative would be further assessed through the Transportation Strategy Steering Committee, including an expected presentation of the concept by Mrs. Ettinger. Finally, I do have to take this opportunity to really congratulate and thank Karen Ettinger. You know, hats off to her, and quite frankly, the entire Trillium team for stepping up and proposing such a partnership to both the region as well as other partners. And of course, now it's up to all of us to work with Trillium to, in fact, make it happen. Last area I wanted to comment on is the interregional strategic economic logistics corridors and gateways connections. It's a mouthful, but I'll say it again, okay? The interregional strategic economic logistics corridors and gateway connections. Now, Ron, being a member of the Transportation Strategy Steering Committee, you'll recognize that, as well as others that are in the chamber here. I know Bruce would recognize it, as well as, there he is, as well as Councillor Barrick. Members of council will recall that we have been pushing very proactively for dialogue with our neighbors to the west, those being Hamilton, Kitchener-Waterloo, Halton, and Peel regions, in an attempt to establish ongoing collaboration on a shared vision of enhancing trade corridors within the province of Ontario, particularly in the southwestern region of the province. Let's face it, you know, why do we talk alone when we can talk collectively? Why does Niagara talk about the Mid-Peninsula Corridor when in fact it actually helps and of course contributes benefits to Hamilton, Halton, and of course KW and Peel regions by connecting those trade corridors? These enhancements, members of council, include the construction, of course, of the Mid-Pen Corridor, and that being from the Peace Bridge through Niagara's Mid-Peninsula, west to the 403, attaching itself to Monroe Airport, and north of the 403 beyond attaching the 403 to the 401. So the Mid-Pen just doesn't stop at the 403. Okay, it actually expands and extends into the 401 and giving advantage and benefit to the KW and of course Brantford, and the list goes on out to the West End, Sarnia, and Windsor. As well, I wanted to mention tonight that it's my intent to present to both regional council as well as these jurisdictions an enhanced Highway 402 corridor that extends into the south, that quite frankly would then redub or rename the Mid-Pen Corridor to the 402 because it attaches to the Mid-Pen Corridor. This would establish, and I want to emphasize this word, this would establish primary trade corridors within the province, that being the 400 highway, the 401, and an enhanced 402, and in brackets here I got Mid-Peninsula Corridor. So essentially you have a 402 corridor that travels from Blue Water, Sarnia, right to the Peace Bridge in Niagara, albeit crossing over to the 403 and or the 401. And of course it connects the arterials, those being the 403, the 406, and the 407, as well as other arterials such as the 410 and the 420. So our intent, members of council, is to develop consensus on a greater Golden Horseshoe Corridors goods movement strategy that takes advantage of enhanced primary trade corridors and present it to the Ministry of Transportation and the province by accomplishing our next steps. First being consolidating a municipal caucus, regional, local political consensus on a common goods movement vision at the provincial and federal levels, as well as to do things differently and proactively with collaboration amongst municipalities, the Southwestern Ontario Gateway Council, industry, the MTO, and other ministries, to explore ways to expedite approvals processes, to promote complementary federal, provincial, and municipal interests, economic development, market access, approvals, processes, joint funding, and finally, as I mentioned earlier, a marketing strategy that includes an enhanced trade corridors network and includes our collective strengths, including our designation as a gateway economic center due to our multimodal capacities here available in Niagara, City of Port Colborne, and available inventory of employment lands that are serviced. So in conclusion, I want to say this. At the end of the day, we talk about many things in this meeting today through the development charges discussion and others. And albeit we do have incentive packages, and it's very robust in terms of what's contained within those incentive packages, CIPs, foreign trade zone incentives through the federal government, our tax increment financing incentives. We have newly established industrial lands that we're beginning to service. And with that, putting together and packaging a marketing strategy My point here is, in my report, is that we still have work to do. We still have work to do with respect to what I mentioned earlier about enhancing our transit system here in Niagara, not only intermunicipal, but expanding and linking the GO to not only go into the north end, but also into the south end. And then second to that, to work with our partners to create not only a marketing strategy, but to package that marketing strategy, including our multimodal capacities, et cetera, but ultimately to ensure that we have a goods movement vision for southwestern Ontario. And of course, that is then communicated not just by the city of Port Colborne and the region of Niagara, but with our partners to the west. So, with that, any questions or comments? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to comment on Trillium Railroad, I think this really validates the good decision that Council of the Day made in securing the rail, and also the good choice that we made in having Trillium as the operator on there. I mean, you know, back then we just knew it was important to get this. You know, and we knew some things that could happen. Here, many years down the road, is a great example. This would never happen if we didn't get it, right? So sometimes those decisions you make and the courage you have to make those decisions, they're a little out of the norm for municipality, but you know, we stepped up and did it, and I think that's something that councils should always strive to do. Really, you know, think down the road of what could happen, and this is just another example of, if you didn't do it, we wouldn't be talking about it today, or have this opportunity.
Yeah, it's all about vision. Members of council, any further questions or comments? With none, I thank you for your attention. I appreciate it. I'll now move on to the Regional Councillors Report. Councillor Barrick, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's a pleasure to be here this evening as well. And recognizing the time and the agenda that you still have ahead of you, I'll be very brief in my comments, except that recognizing that affordable housing in Port Colborne and Niagara is of great importance. And I've been on the Niagara Regional Housing Board for the last 3 or 4 years. And many of you councillors know that. I've received several questions and comments about affordable housing and services in Port Colborne in particular, as well as the region. And I've been here in the past and have given some numbers and responses, and also a commitment to come back to this council at a council meeting in July with a subject matter expert. And I've got to say, I'm very proud to say that Mary Ellen McClellan is here to join us, and I thank her for her patience as well. She's currently the operations manager for NRH. However, this Friday, she will begin her new role as the general manager of NRH. So it's a great opportunity for me to introduce you to Mary Ellen McClellan in her new role as well. She's worked in housing in Niagara since 1996 and with Niagara Regional Housing since 2002. So we really are lucky to have her with us as an organization, and as well as her new role. So she's here this evening to provide a brief presentation as well to answer some of the questions that you have. So with that, Mary Ellen, welcome.
Mary Ellen, welcome. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to start with a couple of handouts. I'm going to hand out the programs and services that Niagara Regional Housing offers. And I'm also going to hand out the housing continuum, and I'll speak to both of these in my presentation. Okay. All right. Sorry, just having a little bit of trouble here. There we go. Good. Good. Okay, thank you. And just click on here? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Niagara Regional Housing is governed by a community board with 14 directors who report directly to Regional Council. And the first are the regional councillor, and Councillor Barrick as well, and formerly also Councillor Timms was on the Niagara Regional Housing Board of Directors as well. We also have 5 housing providers that provide knowledge, direct knowledge about housing issues to the Niagara Regional Housing Board of Directors. Okay, sorry. Why am I having difficulty here? I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
All right, that's,
Just the arrow there.
okay, sorry. 3 public at large. Okay. And additionally, we have 1 tenant representative on our Housing Board of Directors. Okay. The Niagara Housing Affordable Waiting List. Now, just wanted to say that we do have currently 5,982 households currently on the affordable housing wait list. This is a very large waiting list, and it has increased just exponentially over the last few years. Now, to point out, we all know or are related to someone who is in need of affordable housing. It could be that aging parent who is trying to stretch their pension to pay for some of their shelter costs. It could be a disabled relative who is currently on Ontario Disability Support Program. It could be a neighbor, a victim of violence who's trying to flee an abusive situation, or it could be someone who just simply serves us daily and earns minimum wage. So we have a variety of number of individuals that are in need of affordable housing, and I think we're all aware of who they are. In Port Colborne directly, we have 562 households on the affordable housing waiting list, and this is 5.8% of the region-wide waiting list. So it's a fairly large number. Okay. The estimated waiting times in Port Colborne as well are a little bit overwhelming. For 1 bedrooms, these are individuals who are seniors, and for the senior age, we consider that anyone 55 plus. They're waiting an average of 4.25 years. That's quite a wait for someone in need of affordable housing who's a senior. I'd like to draw attention to the red bar, and those are individuals who are not seniors, but are individuals between the ages of 16 and 54, and they are waiting on average 12 years to access affordable housing. This would generally be a 1-bedroom one-bedroom need, and it's those individuals who might be on Ontario Disability Support, or perhaps the working poor who are earning minimum wage. Then you see the green bars, and these are families waiting for affordable housing. Those waiting for a 2-bedroom, perhaps a single mother with 1 child, is waiting 3 years to access affordable housing in Port Colborne. Those waiting for a 3-bedroom would wait 2.25 years, and those with larger families who are in need of a 4-bedroom unit would wait 3.5 years on average for an affordable housing unit. Now, these numbers are not carved in stone. The only time that we could offer a unit is when one becomes vacant. So these are based on averages. Okay. I'd like to bring attention to the housing continuum and the services that Niagara Regional Housing offers. Okay. The services in green that you see across the continuum, and I'll get into them, are those that are funded directly by the federal and provincial government, and they're generally term funding. The next term funding expires April of 2015, and we fully expect that will be another allocation announced later this year or early in 15. We're really dependent on those federal and provincial dollars to be able to offer this wide continuum of services at Niagara Regional Housing. The first one is the Housing First pilot, and this is simply a pilot that we're trying, and it helps to take individuals, homeless individuals, directly off the street. And these are individuals that are offered supportive housing along with that bricks and mortar housing, and there have been 16 individuals taken directly off the street in Port Colborne through this Housing First pilot. The next one is the housing allowance. There have been 14 households that have been given a housing allowance. These are individuals that are currently on that affordable housing waiting list. And I showed you previously that at least one group is waiting up to 12 years for affordable housing. So this is a housing allowance, a set fee. It could be up to $250 that is given to the landlord to supplement the rent of those individuals while they wait on the affordable housing waiting list for affordable housing. The next one, we don't have any wellness units in Port Colborne. Wellness units are a group of agencies and services that are provided right directly within the seniors' buildings. However, what we've done in Port Colborne is we have staff that visit those that are aging in place and need services and provide those direct linkages. Our buildings in Port Colborne aren't large enough to have a wellness unit. These wellness units are funded by the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, but we have done a workaround. We have staff that provide those services directly. The next line is the Niagara Regional Housing owned units. We have 88 units that are owned by Niagara Regional Housing and governed by the Board of Directors as well. And there are two buildings, two senior buildings on Steele Street, and I'll talk to locations a little later, and 5 family townhouses on King Street. We have housing providers, 3 housing providers. These are cooperative and non-profit housing providers who have their own board of directors. We offer legislative oversight at Niagara Regional Housing to those 3 groups, as well as provide funding. We have the rent supplement program. Right now, we currently don't have any rent supplement units in Port Colborne, but this varies from time to time depending on funding and applicant need, as well as a willingness of landlords to come forward. So there's a variety of factors in the rent supplement program. New development. We have 2 new developments, and I'll go through in the next slide the location, but we've actually put over $4 million into new development into Port Colborne to offer affordable housing. The next group is the private market, and it is the Welcome Home Niagara program is down payment assistance to those individuals who's perhaps the only barrier for a household to get into home ownership is that down payment assistance. It's a forgivable loan, and if they stay in the home for 20 years, that loan is forgiven. Otherwise, they are required to pay back that down payment assistance. Although this program doesn't necessarily take individuals directly off the waiting list, it basically reduces potential new applicants from coming on at the other end. So we have offered 12 home ownership assistance to 12 families in Port Colborne. The next one is the Niagara Renovates program, again funded simply by the federal and provincial government, and we have offered 21 loans to private sector households who need to do major repairs to be able to stay in their homes, or modifications for mobility issues, or want to create a secondary suite to offer either an aging parent a home or to earn that extra income and provide much needed affordable housing. Again, that doesn't take individuals directly off the waiting list, but it prevents 21 households from going on to the affordable housing waiting list. Okay. Where is home in Port Colborne? Well, I've talked about the Niagara Regional Housing owned units, and they're at 557 Steele Street, that's a senior building, and 561 Steele Street, it's another senior building, and 709 King Street, and that is a family building. We also then have the cooperative and nonprofit providers. There are 3 of them, one at Saturn Crescent, one in Wellington Street, and one in Elgin Street. The rent supplement, again, currently right now there aren't any, but that varies from time to time depending on need, and there are various addresses throughout Port Colborne. The housing allowances, I've talked about the housing allowances and the Housing First, and they have to be done in partnership with an agency that provides those supports to those individuals. And the agencies providing supports are Port Cares, right here from Port Colborne, and the Raft, and this is an agency that provides supportive services to the youth. They are again at various addresses throughout Port Colborne. The home ownership program, various private sector addresses, as well as Niagara Renovates. New development, we're very proud of the new development. We've been able to offer funding to build 35 new units in Port Colborne, and they're at 569 King Street, and that's through Gateway Residential and Community Support Services Niagara, and it is a supportive housing environment, and community living supportive housing at 750 Fielden Ave, and that's for 15 units, and again, that is supportive housing. And just to point out that we're not the only ones that offer services for housing. We have Port Cares. It's a very valuable partner in Port Colborne, and they offer housing help services to those individuals that need it. They also offer food bank services, crisis services, employment services, youth program, utility assistance for those that can't afford it, trusteeship programs for those individuals that have difficulty meeting their rental obligations, and utility assistance. There's challenges, though. Okay. We have extremely long waiting lists, and they're getting longer with the economic downturn. Housing those individuals and for an applicant having to wait 12 years is pretty extraordinary. Increasing difficult tenant issues. We see this on an ongoing basis, and the economic downturn simply magnified this. Families have been in economic crisis, and it can lead to additional mental health issues, additional addictions, or simply family breakdown, and that requires much more affordable housing. Our demand far exceeds our supply. Again, we have a nice wide continuum. We look for those provincial and federal dollars whenever we can. We apply for everything. We implement as much as we can. We build. We provide supplements, but our demand is far exceeding supply. We have a high number of seniors in Niagara. That too comes with its own challenges. The good news is that affordable housing costs a lot less than putting an aging senior in a long-term care facility. The bad news, perhaps for Niagara Regional Housing, they're staying a lot longer with those services in affordable housing, but ultimately the cost is lower. And again, the most important challenge is dollars, where we need those dollars to be able to develop much needed affordable housing, offer those rent supplements to those individuals that need it, and reduce those wait times. Opportunities. Well, there's always opportunities. Again, I've mentioned the investment in affordable housing. We expect that there will be an announcement later this year or early 2015. And we fully expect to be able to take that allocation and spread it over 4 years and offer those much needed programs. But we are dependent on those federal and provincial dollars. New development. We will have to make some difficult decisions. Which part of the region actually gets the development dollars? So we'll look at the supply, we'll look at the need, and we'll look at the population and make those very difficult decisions. Ontario renovates, again, offered to the private sector, but there are individuals who just can't afford to make those much needed repairs, and we don't want their homes to become condemned. We need individuals to stay in their home as long as they can and reduce those waiting times, or do not come on the waiting list if there's another option. Same with home ownership. Again, funded through those federal provincial dollars. Rent supplement. There are pros and cons to rent supplement. I think the pro is that we can take the size of units that is needed on our waiting list at the time that it's needed and in the location that it's needed. The cons of rent supplement is that for specific to Port Colborne, we don't have those large landlords with larger size building, and often the areas that come available for rent are not in the areas that the applicants need. They're not close to services, they're not close to amenities. The other challenge is that rent supplement, we're currently doing a review of the costs between our 3 program streams, and rent supplement at first glance is about 35% more expensive than the Niagara Regional Housing owned unit. So it costs us more money, and it's very specific. You must have ongoing influx of dollars to be able to offer those ongoing rent supplements. And the other opportunity is partnerships, such as those that we have with Port Cares, to be able to support those individuals who, once they receive that bricks and mortar or that housing, can remain there with those supports and not go back to a state of homelessness. Okay. I would like to point out that we talked about dollars a little earlier before I get to questions, and that we do get, we are funded, the way we are funded, we get most of our funding from the Niagara region. About 51% comes from the Niagara region. 25% comes from our revenues, our rental revenues, and other revenues, such as we rent out our rooftops and whatnot. And we also get federal revenues, or federal funding of 23.3%. We take a small amount out of our reserves, but that's how we're funded. So you can see that about 51% comes directly from the region. Okay. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. McClellan. Well done. Members of council, any questions or comments to the presenter? Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for all that you're doing. I'm really, I'm glad to see all of this being presented to council. And it is a problem that we deal with on a daily basis, and I've spoken to Councillor Barrick about it several times, and he's been very good about supplying the information that we needed. I'd just like to ask one question tonight, and that is about the Niagara Renovates. Can that be used in addition to the RAP program? Is it is something that can go on together, or does one cancel the other out?
Ms. McClellan.
The RAP program was a program that was offered by the federal government through CMHC. It is no longer in existence. Ontario Renovates has replaced the RAP program. So I guess the answer is no. There's no stacking of that program. It has become Ontario Renovates. It's now up to the local service managers to deliver that program, if they choose to deliver it. And here in Niagara, we see it as a very important component.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you. I just Googled it as you were speaking to see if I could get the answer. It's still listed as an active program, so it might be helpful to you to have that changed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Members of council, further questions or comments? Councillor Kenny.
Mary Ellen, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm wondering, when you mention these facts and figures, and you're always saying you need dollars, which, you know, it is why these people are coming for assistance, but how often does the board look at established, I guess, low incomes and looks at their upgrading them? Like you're talking about, there's assistance for families, but how about the units themselves? How often do you go in and look at the units? I've been in a few, and they need that help. That's why they're in there. But when they go and ask them, you know, can I have this floor replaced or this ceiling replaced, they always get answer from whoever is the manager of that particular unit that, oh no, there's no dollars for that. So how often does the board itself or a group go through and look at that situation?
On an annual basis, we create our capital plans. We have aging buildings, specifically Niagara Regional Housing, the units that are owned by Niagara Regional Housing, for example, the ones on Steele Street and King Street. Those are the oldest affordable housing. They were downloaded from the provincial government. They was formerly the Ontario Housing Corporation. So that they are the oldest stock. The second oldest stock is the co-ops and nonprofits, but they're a younger model than the owned stock. Every year, we develop capital plans and we develop day-to-day budgets. We're currently in the process right now of developing our 2015 capital plan, as well as our full budgets and our day-to-day budgets. And they'll go forward to regional council they'll go to our board of directors for approval, and then ultimately on to council for approval. Those capital plans, we stretch those dollars as far as we can. We look at safety and security of the individuals first as a first primary grouping. We then look at the infrastructure and the risk to the building. Aesthetic is the third criteria, very important. We want to keep those buildings looking well. We want them to fit into the neighborhood, but it is our third criteria when we're looking at the capital budget. We have a day-to-day operating fund that does those repairs. We have processes in place. Individuals can call in to get those repairs, whether it's repair to a toilet, broken toilet, or lights, or whatever they have, and we have a time frame that they are repaired within. We have lots of day-to-day repairs. We've generally gone over budget in that particular line, and we have to balance throughout the year to be able to meet the needs of the residents. Flooring is an interesting one. We replace flooring as required. When usually on move out. It's very difficult to put new flooring into a current unit when they're living there, but on move out, we'll assess that situation. Our staff are very diligent at doing building condition assessments. They inspect every unit on an annual basis to identify what's needed in our capital budget or in our day-to-day operating budget. Building envelope assessments, they're inspected annually. We come up with our building conditions, and we look at them quite closely.
Thank you, Ms. McClellan.
If I can
Councillor
add to that one through you,
Go ahead,
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Barrett.
It's a great question, Councillor, and if I may, Mary Ellen. Looking forward in the near term, NRH is looking at approximately $40 million worth of capital upgrades on existing stock. So assuming the $40 million is spent, it nets you 0 additional units. We've had serious conversations about how to best utilize those funds such that when we're doing repairs, we can also somehow increase the number of units as well. And we've already done some projects in the stock in Fort Erie and Niagara Falls to assess and have better value for money there. Our new units in Welland, as an example as well, have been constructed with a much higher level of sustainability as well. So the capital cost, to your point, ideally we won't have to put as much there if we've got sustainability in mind.
Councillor Kenny.
Thank you for that. And just one more. In the, your presentation to us, you mentioned this Welcome Home Niagara. How do individuals find out about that? Like how do you have to be a renter already with the regional housing, or can you just be a renter anywhere and say, I want to get out of this and try to get my own home? So how can I go about that?
Thank you.
And currently, the program, again, with the new allocation, may come some changes to our programs. We have to stretch limited dollars. But currently, the Welcome Home Niagara program is open to anyone in the Niagara region who is currently a renter. They must be a renter. That does not have to be in affordable housing. We encourage those in affordable housing who have had increases in their wages and whatnot to move on. So we certainly market to those individuals and encourage it. We've had some success in that area, but it's open to anyone in the Niagara region until we run out of money in that particular yearly allocation. But it can be anyone.
Thank you, Ms. McClellan. Thank you, Councillor Kenny. Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a great presentation. I really learned a lot. It must be absolutely overwhelming to have that huge of a number of people on a waiting list. What's the kind of, do you have like a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan to address that shortfall of housing and that huge need?
Well, we're certainly looking at that's a very good point. And we do have ideas going forward on how to try to reduce, but it simply comes down to this. Our economic position in Niagara has to increase for less individuals to be on those waiting lists, or we have to develop new affordable housing through a variety of ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be new development, but we have to have additional bricks and mortar to accommodate those waiting lists. So our targets are to continue on their continuum, do some new development that will pick away at that waiting list, offer those programs to the private sector that keep people from going on that waiting list, and changing our mandates to serve the clientele, the age of the clientele that we need. So we will pick away at it, we'll do our best, but again, we will be certainly advocating and going forward for additional funding wherever we can. In Niagara, we've been very fortunate and we grab every penny of development that we can, so we've been fortunate there. And to add to Councillor Barrick's discussion about the recent Welland build, that is extremely self-sufficient. There will be no additional dollars on the tax levy, so it is totally self-sustaining, and that's the kind of building that we would like to do in the future that doesn't cost the taxpayer anything and will remain affordable for those individuals that move into those units in perpetuity. Once we build them, they'll be there affordable in perpetuity.
Thank you. With no further comments or questions, thank you, Ms. McClellan, for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrick, anything further?
Thank you for your time, Council.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the regional councillor? Members of council, we'll now move on to new business. Councillor's items. Councillor Bogger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff. Last week I brought up about the ash tree problem in the city and asked for a report back, and I understand that's coming as to what people are mandated to do on their property and what the neighbors can expect. But I'd also like to have staff come back with some report as to what we do with the ash trees that we take down. Traditionally, we sent them to the dump. I know there's at least one, if not more, communities that are taking the ash trees that are on their property, having them milled. There's nothing wrong with the wood inside. The ash board just gets underneath the bark, so it doesn't go into the wood. The wood's still very usable. They're having it milled, and it's coming back, and they're using it for applications in municipal buildings. So, you know, everything from stuff in libraries, benches, and everything like that. It may or may not be practical for the city of Port Colborne, but it just seems to be a waste to take what is essentially good wood and putting it in the dump. So there may be other things we can do other than that application, but I'd just like to see staff come back with some, well, what we're doing now, and maybe some suggestions incorporating some of this as to what we can do in the future. Just to take a resource that we're not using and maybe make it usable, whether we use it or somebody else uses it, rather than seeing it end up in the landfill.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Hanson, any comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The direction of council right now is to not handle this wood in any way in terms of disposal to other parties and properties. We run into some problems in past years. So we make the wood available to the adjacent property owners where the trees are put down, or we take it to the landfill site as per council's direction. Certainly we'd be happy to do a report on this and see if there's any other partnerships out there whereby there might be perhaps a sawmill or someplace in the area that could accept this type of material, or whoever the parties are to take the material. So we can take a look at that in the report.
Good, thank you, Mr. Hanson. That's fine, Councillor. We'll take that as staff direction to actually look at coming back with some information from staff on that. Great. Any further new business from this side? Councillor Steele, then Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Moran's been waiting patiently all evening listening to the ongoings of City Council. I'm sure he's very excited. Anyways, Mr. Moran came to see me the other day after speaking with staff and City Hall with regards to an issue. He lives at 128 Clare Avenue, and he's having a family wedding in his backyard. He came with regards to the noise variance fee, which is presently $300. He wants to speak to council. When he came to see staff, it was Wednesday. It was too late to get on tonight's agenda. So I would ask that we waive our procedural bylaw in order to allow Mr. Moran to speak.
Moved by Councillor Steele, seconded by Councillor Desmarais. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Mr. Moran, if you want to come on up. What was the address, Bill? Bill, what was the address? 128. 128. Mr. Moran, welcome.
Yes, my name is Dollard Moran. I live at 128 Clare Avenue, like the councillor says. I've been there for many years. I've been on a disability for about 8.5 years. My youngest daughter moved away because of work about 5 years ago, and she was just recently married in Banff, and of course she had to have her parents there, so we went for her wedding and everything. And I have another daughter getting married in October, and getting back to Crystal, she wanted to come back home and have a reception for the family and friends, and we couldn't afford a hall, so we figured we'd have it in our yard, and we talked to all our neighbors, we talked to the police, and they told us that we had to talk to City Hall. And then when we come to City Hall, they told us there was a noise, I don't know what you call it.
Noise bylaw.
Yeah, and they told me it was going to cost me another $300. I couldn't afford a hall, and I can't afford the $300, so I was just asking for a waive on the fee.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moran. Members of council, any questions or comments of the presenter? With none, thank you. I appreciate it. And Councillor Steele, right back to you.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So I did speak to staff with regards to us, and that'll bring me to my second thing after we deal with this. But at this time, I would ask that council support my motion to waive the $300 fee for Mr. Moore.
Do I have a second on that, please? Councillor Elliott. Are there any questions or comments to that? Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, what's the $300 for? Is it in case there's a noise complaint and we have to send our bylaw people after hours, or just give us some idea what
Mr.
we're
Aquilina?
waiving if we waive this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Bonner. We actually brought a report forward, I think 2 years ago, that actually put this fee in place. Prior to that, there was no fee. And it was really just for administration purposes, because there is an actual report that needs to go to council and the actual exemption. So it's really administration. There's also another process that is followed with the city clerk's office. So I want to speak for Ashley, but possibly you might want to comment on what the fee is, or there is something that could be possibly removed or waived.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The noise bylaw provides that the city clerk can do a discretionary exemption to the provisions of the noise bylaw, but generally those have been reserved for emerging issues that are unanticipated related to construction activities and things, and would not fall under the situation.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor?
Can I also ask then, has anybody else applied, has anybody else paid the $300 to your knowledge, say this year or the year before, for applying for this exemption? Yeah.
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, people have paid that $300 fee, and council has exempted the noise variance bylaw for that particular event.
Councillor?
I'll wait for a minute to hear if anybody else.
Okay. Any further comments? Councillor Butters.
One question, were they businesses or private individuals who were looking for or who had paid the 300?
Mr. Aquilina?
I believe, through you, Mr. Mayor, it was for a private business, but it was dealing with a charitable donation for a concert, and one that is coming to my mind is on Northland Avenue. The gentleman there actually had a concert, but council has in the past had different events, weddings, etc., that have paid the fee.
Okay, thank you. Councillor? That's fine. Further questions or comments, members? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Aquilina. What exactly does the exemption get you? I mean, you come in, you pay the $300 for noise exemption, but that doesn't mean you can just make all the noise you want. So really, what are you getting exempted from?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, the bylaw right now says up until 11 o'clock you can have noise. The exemption is beyond 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., 2 p.m., whatever council does decide to put in place. We then forward that off to the NRP, who then would enforce if there is any violation of the bylaw.
Thank you. Councillor?
I guess that's where the splitting of the hairs comes in. Because if you say that after 11 o'clock you can make noise till 1 o'clock, whatever your noise exemption is, if you go beyond too much noise, your neighbors are going to complain anyways, and the police are going to come even though you have the exemption. I mean, there's a limit to the noise, amount of noise that you can make, whether you have an exemption or not. You know, it's kind of like even before 11 o'clock, if somebody's got a child sleeping next door and you're making too much noise, they're going to phone the police and complain about you. And just because you have a piece of paper that says, hey, I can't make as much noise as I want, I can just make noise. If that makes any sense. I mean, to get an exemption from it, we're kind of going around in circles. How much noise is too much noise? Your neighbors complain anyways, even though you have it. You know, to get an exemption, you can make X number of noise up to 11 o'clock, which everybody can. You're basically paying it to get an exemption from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. If he doesn't ask for an exemption and doesn't make enough noise to disturb his neighbors, then he doesn't really need one. Like it's kind of the cart before the horse. You can make noise, but you can't. If you want to describe what this actually does, I'm sure that everybody would be happy.
Through Mr. Mayor, what council's direction was, and we actually had requests, what administratively council wanted to have is getting all of the comments from the neighbors, what their consent was. Were they okay with any potential noise if it exceeds the actual noise bylaw decibel level? What we then would do is through that report, we would actually, after we contacted all the surrounding neighbors, we would then report back to council. So it's strictly the administration time for staff to put forward the report based on council's previous direction.
Thank you. Further questions or comments, members? Before I go to the recommendation, I am going to ask for leave. I will need a motion for leave. Councillor Steele? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Desmarais? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. We'll now entertain the motion with no further comments or questions. It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Are there any further? Councillor Steele, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. So you're all set, Mr. Moran? You're done. Good.
You can stick around if you want.
Yeah.
Councillor.
Yeah. Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Council, for supporting Mr. Moran on this issue. But in speaking with staff with regards to this, staff did speak to me that they want to bring a new bylaw forward, a report forward to Council to look at changing some of these fees, because there are some things that they can do without having a report coming back to us, which actually saves us money. So it's almost like some of the authority we've given the planning office. We get them in the email all the time. They have authority to do up to certain square feet of building and things like that. I'm not sure where staff is coming from, but they will be coming back to us. I don't know if you guys need our direction, if the clerk or Dan
Mr. Aquilina
knows a lot more about this than I do.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, bylaw enforcement in conjunction with Ashley is preparing that report.
Okay, so you are going to see things, and the one thing I discussed with staff at the time was some of these fees, like to charge a homeowner $300. I mean, a lot of this came forward because of Canal Days and Canadian Core, which we had here every year. You know, we had our staff there, we had hired consultants there, well, noise and all that. I can see that. If you want to rent the Market Square or Lakeview Park or whatever park in town that would allow something, you know, if you want to put a concert on or some type of event that has noise associated with it, you know, I could see a $300 fee, but, you know, for a home with a backyard wedding or anniversary or something, you know, is it $25 at $50? I don't know. Staff is going to bring that forward, but I think now that we have a handle on what we're doing here in the city, I think staff has a better idea of what council's direction is on these things. I think you'll see more of a tiered payment system, which I think is only fair. I mean, it started off more for big events, not small events like these. So I look forward to receiving that. Thank you, Worship.
And thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one item that came to me via email. A resident sent me a picture of the sign at the Valley Center with a yard sale sign taped very nicely to the side of it. We really can't have that. So we need to do something about yard sale signs. As much as I love going to yard sales, we can't have signs all over the place. It's crazy. I mean, I seriously have almost, 2 weeks ago, I almost got in an accident on Saturday morning because the guy in front of me slowed down to read a yard sale sign at the corner of Main Street and Steele. Like, it's insane. We have to get on these signs. And the Valley Center is the last place we want signs taped to. So if we could work on this issue, it would be a good thing.
Mr. Aquilina or Mr. Hanson? I'll give you guys a kick at it. Well, I think what the council is looking for, and she makes a valid point, but I think, you know, let's look at what we can do about it.
Yeah. Through Mr. Mayor, as Mr. Hanson has alluded to, council has had this topic for consideration in the past. It's one of those issues. You put up the sign, how do you then enforce the bylaw? I guess you can go around taking the signs off. You're going to have a lot of unhappy individuals, but it's a difficult bylaw to enforce, our sign bylaw. But it's one that we're going to have to do our best to get a handle on it, but it's not easy. It's not easy.
Does a sign not usually point you to the culprit?
You have
it sounds like I'm being facetious, but
No.
I'm not. I'm trying to come to because you're right, Dan, we have dealt with this issue before. And I think Councillor Demery brings up a valid point, because you see them all over the place. It does litter the municipality to some extent. And of course, when you start putting it on signs like the Valley Center sign, which, you know, and it can be a safety concern too. So 9 times out of 10, the sign does point to the culprit. You know, is there a method where we can have bylaw? And I'm not saying go out and start handing out tickets. I think for the most part, we can simply just warn people that they don't do this. This is against bylaw. There can be a fine attached to it if it's, maybe you're caught the second or third time. But initially, if we can just try to dampen it by hitting it hard.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. We will look into it, and we can take that into consideration.
Good answer.
And bring it forward to the actual individuals that are holding the event.
Okay, members of council, any comments? Councillor Demery, then Councillor Steele.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Might I suggest that we even entertain the idea of community signboards? That may be something that works for people. They want to post their signs, and they're going to post their signs. I know that's going to happen. But it may be an idea to have community signboards. And also, if everybody understands, they can use Kijiji for free. They can post all of their events on Kijiji. It costs nothing.
Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Your Worship. My neighbor, the tenant in my neighbor's building, ties it to our stop sign at the corner here. It's not a good thing. I have no problem with some of these signs. I mean, some people are very creative. They'll put a pylon sign up on a corner like you see the real estate signs for open houses. Others, though, which really peeves me, is you see it on the Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday prior to the Saturday they're having it, but it remains on that post until somebody finally comes along and takes it down. And it's usually not the homeowner that put it there. They don't come back and take it down. There's where I'd like to see that we gather those up and go back and say, hey, happens again, there's a fine. I mean, it's littering. I mean, it is, and it shouldn't be left. I mean, especially when you've got nice light poles downtown and they get all this tape wrapped around for a sign of some sort. That's what bothers me. I don't mind people doing an event, and you're right, Councillor. Is it community boards? Is it more of an education on behalf of us as a city to say to people, look, if you want to do it, this is the way you got to do it. I mean, the real estate agents do it the right way. Other events are done the right way. Put a sign up near your house, take it down, away you go. But no taping to or light posts or hydro poles or whatever, then they're left for months on end. So those are the people I'd like to see us go after.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Butters.
Well, I am the yard sale queen of the entire universe, just saying. But I don't like seeing signs up all over either, and especially the ones that stay up forever. But, you know, would there be a way to even utilize like the city's website and a community bulletin board where it was like a free service to citizens? You can post your get your yard sale posted up on there and get it well known that people go to that website, might even be interested enough to look at other stuff on the city website. God knows, you never know. It's like an opportunity to educate, right?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Further questions or comments? Well, I just want to make one comment. When you look on that backboard, it says, it's not no, it's how. So and I think, Councillor Demery, you bring up a great point with respect to community billboards. And we have a lot of different mediums in terms of websites and of course, even billboards or our screens at the Valley Center and things of that nature. So there's a lot of ideas there that can be explored. Now, again, let's get away from the no. Let's go to the how. And I think Mr. Howe's got his hand up to contribute to that how. So I'm going to pass the torch and punt it over to him. Mr. Howe.
The city has in its website a community bulletin board. People can go in there and they can add all the stuff they want. And there isn't a fee right now. You can go in there and post it about some events that are on there that's part of the community.
Thank you. Mr. Hakeem, is there anything over at the Valley Center in terms of our screens? Is there an opportunity there as well?
At the Valley Center for a fee, including some of the static boards that we use, and we actually do get good requests and respond to those favorably.
And how much is that fee?
Right now, it's set at $40 per week for the advertising, mostly businesses and other agencies that want to use it for any length of time. And there are some other rates that we apply in the fees and rates that's been approved by council to offer not-for-profits a reduction.
Great, thank you. Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to tell Councillor Butters that there's an app you can get that when lawn sales posted on the city website, it pings on your iPad. So I just, just.
There you go. So, Mr. Aquilina, currently right now, we have a bylaw in place. And what you're looking for right now is council direction with respect to how to enforce that bylaw.
Mr. Mayor, I don't think we need direction. I think it's pretty self-explanatory what we can try to do.
Great. Can we, is there a method whereby we can get a communication out there, hopefully by the media, but possibly through our website, to communicate to a lot of these folks that are doing this advertising, that they do have those different options available to them? I'll look at you, Dan, Bob, possibly Harry. Is there, do we have that ability? Dan, go ahead.
Well, I think, Mr. Mayor, it's certainly something we can actually put on our website. We can actually put it in the City Hall newsletter the next time it goes out.
Good idea. Great. Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. And thanks, staff, and thank you, Councillor Desmarais. I think we've exhausted this one, but there are opportunities there, and hopefully we can get that message out. Thank you. Further new business, members?
Just a quick update.
Go ahead.
I know payback's what they call a biatch, but anyways, at the bottom of the sixth inning, it's Toronto Blue Jays 13, Boston Red Sox zip.
Thank you, Councillor. Members of staff, are there any updates or responses? Mr. Hakeem.
Just a couple of items. One is mostly public relation related. The Grand Tour des Jardins is coming through the city of Port Colborne. It's a cycle tour. The Vélo Quebec organization that we tried to facilitate actually several months ago. But they did provide us with some background information with respect to approximately 1,600 cyclists coming through. Again, they're going to be leaving Welland area around 6:30 and cycling through to Niagara Falls, and they've got to be there by 6 p.m. But they're certainly using Port Colborne as a destination to stop and perhaps through the canal. And we've provided them with as much information about the, the opportunity being in Port Colborne. So that's on August my French here, Wednesday. Yeah, August the 6th. So it's sometime during the day. From 6:45 till about 1 p.m. You'll see about 1,600 cyclists coming through, and they have a posted route that they're using. The other item, actually, staff met today, from engineering Ron, Peter, and myself, including the CEO, with the Cruise Association representatives, and we came up with, we certainly discussed last week's experience, the closure of Elm as it was extended, and we kind of impressed upon them the seriousness of the closure. But at the time, obviously things went well, but as of today, we went further to at least coordinate our efforts, and we've been able to come up with a plan that will allow them to close it to the Elm. And I've given a small site plan package there quickly highlighting some of the changes. And what we're going to do is actually what we discussed was that we would be closing Clarence to Elm, and it would be pending approval of the businesses, which I think as late as this afternoon, Peter reported that Food Basics was okay. There's 7-Eleven and the Shoppers members needed approximately 2-week window, so we're not quite sure what that really means, but we're going to find out specifically. But there is an appetite to at least have this closure take effect. What we really need to do is we need to have a special council, a special meeting of council to review this and to amend the bylaw and perhaps pass new bylaws that will encompass the closure to Elm, as well as I think incorporate Market Square.
Thank you, Mr. Hakeem. And members of council, just a heads up, the intent is to call a special meeting of council for Wednesday evening, this Wednesday. So it'd be nice if we can have at least 5 of you show up. I know I won't be here. I do apologize in advance. I'll be in Clarkson watching my daughter play soccer. And Clarkson, as you know, isn't just around the corner. It's way down the other part of the QEW. So she's got a game, and I'll be tied up with her there. So the deputy mayor will be... Who is the deputy mayor right now anyways? Is that you, Frank, or is that Ron? So you're it, Ron. But besides Ron, if 5 of you guys can show up so we can get this thing passed, and because their event's going to be happening on Thursday evening. Mr. Heil?
Your worship, can we poll members of council just to make sure that we can get a quorum? Because if we
Thank
can't
you.
get a quorum, there's no sense to
Good
it.
point, Mr. Heil. Members of council? Councilor Bodner?
My son's birthday, we had coming here from Newfoundland. I can't really bail on a birthday and
Yeah, no, definitely, absolutely.
Let me know time and maybe I can.
More than likely to be. Members of council, who can't be here? 5 o'clock? That's no good? How about 6 o'clock? 6, Frank, good? Yvonne, good? Dave, good? No? Okay, so we got 2. Barb's good, 3. You're right here, Bill, come on.
At 6:30, I have something. That's
Okay.
So
Okay, so
5
3.
is good for me, or.
So we got
3 or
1,
4
2,
now.
3, B? Well, 4 is Angie, so we need a 5th. So hopefully one of you guys,
And it's just dealing with this?
just dealing with this.
Report?
It's gonna be, I'm assuming it's,
Report on this. Is that
Harry,
what it is?
I'm assuming it's gonna be a slam dunk. It's just a matter of creating a bylaw. The clerk's gonna prepare that bylaw. You're gonna come in with a short report that we already have, quite frankly, right now. We're gonna entertain the comments from the 2 primary businesses that are impacted. And then, of course, present the bylaw and move forward. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct.
Okay. Ashley, any issues? Okay. Councilor Bodnar? I wouldn't even say it would be that long. I'd say 5 or 10 minutes. It's just a matter of formalizing the bylaw, so that way they can proceed on Thursday evening with the expansion of the car show that's happening on Clarence Street. The drive-in is probably going to be longer for you than the actual meeting.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a mic.
Mr. Heil?
Your worship, they were hoping to have 100 to 150 cars. This last Thursday, they had over 250 cars from coming all over, and there's 320 registered, and it's exploding because there's no fee and the road is closed and it makes it attractive for everyone. And it is a huge economic boost to the businesses and industry. So
wait for the debate for Wednesday?
Yes.
I'm in.
You're in, okay. So we have 5. We're okay. So Thursday at 6 o'clock, or I'm sorry, Wednesday at 6 o'clock, if we can schedule a special meeting of council, Madam Clerk?
Can you
Have
do
the
5:30? Frank, can you do 5:30?
5:35, I guess on vacation, that's why I can't get out. 5:35,
Okay, so how about 5:30? You still work? So 5:30 on Wednesday, we'll have the bylaw prepared, and once again, I do apologize, I'm down the QE, so Councilor Bodnar will be sitting in my place, if he can make it. If not, we'll have to designate somebody else.
Frank's 5, the vote's 6.
5:30. We're looking at 5:30 Wednesday. We're good to go.
Don't have to come?
Okay. Harry, anything else?
No, Your Worship.
Okay. Anything else, members of staff? Before you, go ahead, Councilor Bodnar.
Just a comment on Velo Quebec that's coming through with the riders. In my other capacity as chair of Niagara South Coast Tourism Association, we're going to have our new magazine that council has seen that represents our 5 communities and the businesses that belong to our association will be available for each of those riders as they come
Great.
through. So.
Great. Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Desmarais?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as an addition to the discussion on the car show, I just want to let you know that Thursday night in my job is selling tickets for the 50/50 tickets for the Niagara Community Foundation. I had a gentleman come up that was with a group from Binbrook and brought some cars down and had told me that they love our city. They think it's an absolute treasure. He told me that I didn't realize what a treasure I had here. I said, I do think I do, but in any case, he said that they are actually talking to other car show attendees from different shows across southern Ontario, and they're ranking the one that's developing in Port Colborne up amongst around the top. So they're really excited about it. They love our quaint little shops, is what he said, and they're just really very happy about it. And so that's all good. It's
Great.
all good.
Thank you, Councilor. And just think, when they finish off the mid-pen quarter, they can just zip down here in half the time. Members of council, if I may, before I proceed on to our lifted items, I'd be remiss, actually. I think any of us would be remiss if we didn't mention this weekend. And I do want to give a quick plug to Canal Days, and for you folks at COGECO land, to come on down to Canal Days. I'm not going to get into the event because most, if not all, people throughout the region, at least as far as COGECO will reach, do recognize what Canal Days is all about. But I do want to take this opportunity to thank all the folks that worked tirelessly throughout the entire year to put on what you're going to actually witness this weekend. The committee in particular and the volunteers that spend every second week at committee meetings throughout the entire year, starting a week after Canal Days, and then of course running into the following year's Canal Days, and of course the teams that they represent, whether it be the car show folks, whether it be the museum, and I'm going to stop there because I'm going to miss somebody, but you get what I'm saying. You know, all the different venues that are as a part of Canal Days and the folks that are at the committee meetings, but equally as important is the folks they represent with respect to the many, and I'm talking the myriad of volunteers that then are able to put these different venues on, as well as the other volunteers that we see throughout the Canal Days event. And of course, for all you folks that are traveling through Canal Days, please take a second and say thank you, because they work extremely hard, not only before, but during the event. And finally, the sponsors. There's no doubt that you know, a city of 18,000 people would be extremely challenged financially to put an event on at the caliber that we put on with Canal Days. So the sponsors as well have to be thanked, and not just from Port Colborne and the Niagara region, but all across Canada and parts of the United States. People actually invest some of their hard-earned dollars into this event because of the quality that it attracts and attaches itself to both here throughout the Niagara region, nationally and of course internationally. So just a great big shout out for the event and for those that are involved in the event, the different venues. By all means, go on canaldays.ca and everything's there for you. But most importantly, just a thank you. Those two words are so important to say. Thank you to all the sponsors, the volunteers, and of course the Canal Days Committee that worked tirelessly to make sure this event happens, and hopefully without a hitch. Besides that, guys, you know, pray for good weather, because if we see what's, well, I'm hoping so, you know. I'm hoping the weather they're calling for the entire week stops on Friday and we get that good weather. But if we get weather like last year, I'm hoping that we'll have the crowds like we did last year, and of course the outcomes that we had last year. So all you folks, come on down to Port Colborne, Niagara South Coast, and of course enjoy Canal Days and enjoy the hosts here down in our community, that being our community. So with that, members, I'm now going to move on to the adoption of the minutes. We do have, oh, go ahead, Councillor Elliott.
On which we're advertising Canal Days. And I had all of our family members that come out of their cottages and say, hey, you guys are on TV. And I'm like, what do you mean we're on TV? He says, you guys are advertising Canal Days on Global. Yeah, that's because they got a great reach. Then the next day, somebody else come up to me and say, hey, I saw Port Colborne on TV. And it's like, on Global? Yeah. What are you doing? Advertising Canal Days. It's the reach that they have. So it is getting out there. They hadn't seen the commercials before, and they said that they really enjoyed them, thought they were professionally done. So just kudos to the group that Harry and your gang and Special Events Committee for choosing Global to advertise on. It looks like the reach is having its effect. So even with an antenna and the only station you get is Global, you got to see it. So the word is getting out, so hopefully we draw people in.
Great, thank you, Councillor Elliott. And not only the further reach, but what we tried to do, guys, if you've seen the commercial, what we tried to do this year was not just contain it within Canal Days. We really tried to take that dollar and just kind of stretch it a bit, and also include components of the municipality and the region, quite frankly. So you'll see, although quickly and subliminally, you'll see that beach shot, you'll see that marina shot, you'll see that wakeboarding shot, you'll see that Sherkston shot, and even some of the wineries and some of the other attractions that are available throughout the region. You'll see them quickly throughout the commercial, albeit it is a Canal Days commercial. We really tried to stretch that marketing dollar to also include the other amenities that are available here locally as well as throughout the region. So you're right, Dave. You know, there's no question that Pacific Productions, who is the company that put that together, did a great job, and of course on the urging of the committee. So job well done, guys. Well done. And COGECO. Yeah, actually, these guys over here too, by the way. COGECO was a great part of that. So not only showing the video, but also some of the footage that we had. So kudos to COGECO. Thank you guys too. Well done. Members of council, we're now going to move on to the adoption of the minutes. I'll be looking for a mover and seconder, please. The minutes of the 17th meeting regular of Committee of the Whole, dated July 14th, 2014. Councillor Bodner, do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Danch. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. We'll now move into the consideration of the items requiring a separate discussion. We will start off with item number 1. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Department of Chief Administrative Officer, report number 2014-03, subject repair or replacement of retainer wall adjacent to City Hall. The recommendation is one, that staff be directed to proceed with option B2 of this report to the following. Lease the rear land of 54 Charlotte Street at a nominal fee. Grade the land to current level of City Hall parking lot and create additional City Hall parking spaces. Create 2 exclusive parking spaces for 54 Charlotte Street. Install suitable storm drainage. Rebuild City Park parking lot damaged by the lack of lateral support, and eliminate the need for the lateral support or retaining wall between the properties. And that the financing be from the capital reserve and unallocated capital financing with any shortfall paid from the 2015 capital budget. And 2, that staff not proceed at this time with the parking lot extension over the rear lands at 50 Charlotte Street.
Thank you, Councillor. Have a seconder to that, please. Councillor Demaray, questions or comments? Councillor Kenny.
Thank you once again, Your Worship. I'd like to have the writer, which I believe is Mr. Heil, make some comments on this report before I ask some questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Howe?
Your Worship, overall, what we talked about, 2010, there was a tender out to try to repair the wall on the east side. In the report, in the very top, it talked about the west side, which is I was writing it, I was facing south instead of facing north, so I should say the east side. The tender that came in was, as noted here, right now at 5%, we're anywhere from 59 to 60 or 60 to $63,000 to put the wall in. There's some photos attached to the report. It's in bad shape. If we do nothing, I know that the property owner has some issues. She's been in contact with me. Our parking lot is continuing to sag away, and it's seeping off into the neighbor's property. There is an obligation, I believe, from the city's perspective, to at least fix that wall. Or if we can do it more economically, this report suggests let's save $10,000 or $15,000 in capital, just make it all a parking lot, and then we don't have to worry about trying to fix or maintain that wall in the future. And that was the intention of this report, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Heil. I just had some concerns. I spent some time and I looked out there and saw that the property behind that building is terrible. That's not city's fault. There's garbage, there's pallets, there's chunks of wood. It's not well maintained. However, I looked at the report originally that it was page 208 of the report, and it says, economically, it makes sense to proceed with this work rather than trying to rebuild a retaining wall at the cost of between 17 and 20. That's just for the retaining wall. That's not to do any repairs to the parking lot, the little bit that's deteriorating, not to do anything, but just do the retaining wall. Now, if we fill this property or make it level to ours, which how we ever got away with grading that property so much higher than the one next to us is beyond me, but somehow we got away with it. But anyways, the cost to fill that is approximately, on here it says $43,000. So if the retaining wall is $20,000, just to fix the retaining wall and not do any repair to the property back there, because as far as I'm concerned, that's the person who owns that property should be cleaning up their property, it's around $20,000. I just don't know, and then I'm concerned that, I guess, if we raise the property on hers, how is that going to affect 50? And I said, and I think the report asked about 50. Maybe there's a lot grading plan that would not make that slope would be less or whatever. I think it's a lot to invest without just fixing the retaining wall. If you fix the retaining wall, our property won't be sliding into hers, and unless she has an issue with the fact that we're that much higher, and it's been that way since we built City Hall, and there's never been a problem. So I think it's just, we just need to fix the retaining wall and save ourselves some money.
Thank you,
That's-
Councillor. Mr. Howe.
Thanks.
Your worship, I'm going to apologize if I've written this incorrectly. To fix the wall and not touch her property and fix our parking lot is 60,000. It's 60,000. And what I'm suggesting in here is that if we can fill it in, make a parking lot, it only costs 43,000, which is $17,000 to $20,000 cheaper than building the wall. I'm sorry if I've misworded it incorrectly, and I think you've read it, and I may have it written incorrectly. The cost for the wall and to fix our parking lot and leave whatever's over there is $60,000 to $63,000. That's our cost, period. If we have to fix it, it's $60,000 to $63,000. The economical advantage of actually filling that in and making a parking lot, we're going to save $17,000 to $20,000 because it's only going to cost us around $43,000. It's cheaper to do that, to make that parking lot, than it is to build the wall. I'm sorry if the wording's incorrect or misread.
Thank you, Mr. Howe. Councillor? That's fine. Councillor Demeray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess through you to Mr. Heil, when this would be done, would we be changing the grade on the new parking lot you create so that this problem wouldn't exist with the next property?
Mr. Howe.
Your worship, there were two things, and I've talked with people that could remember what it was here. When City Hall was built, that wooden wall was there, and it was never changed. And it wasn't great then, it paved up to it, and we built up. What would happen is that we would take all the water, collect it in stormwater so it doesn't run off to the west, the east, that way. Yeah. Nor would it run to the property owner to the south. We'd collect the water so there isn't any water. The grade change over there would be a gradual grass change. And if you look on the plan that's attached to the report, you can see it's on page number 212. It would be designed by engineering so that there would be a gradual slope, a collection of water, and then a grade, so it wouldn't impact the property at 50 Clarence. We simply can't move the problem further to the east. That would not be the intention.
Thank you, Mr. Howe. Further questions or comments on the resolution? Your pleasure to the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to the second item. Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Department of Planning and Development Report Number 2014-49, Subject Recommendation Report for a Zoning Bylaw Amendment, File Number D14-07-14736 Weaver Road. Recommendation is that the Council of the City of Port Colborne approve the zoning bylaw amendment attached hereto as Appendix A, rezoning the land from A agricultural to A-379 special events. 2, that the city clerk is hereby authorized and directed to proceed with the giving of the notice of passing of the bylaw in accordance with the Planning Act. 3, that pursuant to the provisions of Section 34(17) of the Planning Act, no further notice of public meeting be required.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a second to that, please? Councillor Danch, questions or comments? Councillor Butters.
Well, I raise it for Councillor Bodner's conflict, but as well, if I could direct a couple of questions through to Mr. Aquilina. First off, Mr. Aquilina, could you just kind of verify for me that the way that this bylaw is structured, that it does not allow for like I'll call it a mini Woodstock Music Festival by anyone, anywhere, anytime in the future?
You heard. I'm just kidding. Mr. Aquilina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Your Worship. If council would refer to page 243, that is the draft bylaw. And in there you will see that the actual bylaw pertains to special events related to weddings and similar type of events, whether it be a wedding shower, those natured events, as well if there's any agricultural use of a special event that would be allowed on the property as well. That is contained right in the bylaw, and there are the other provisions that are in this bylaw as well that you may be referring to in your next set of questions.
And then the limitation to the numbers, could you speak to that a little bit, and that pertain to the amount of cars that this piece of property that they're looking to rezone can hold, and event tents and people?
Mr. Aquilino?
Through your worship, this portion of the property is 2.7 hectares in size, which is about 6.5 acres. And what we have done, it's contained in that footprint that would be allowed to hold these special events. We've also enabled the bylaw to actually restrict the size of tents on the property. And the maximum gross floor area of the tent can be 330 square meters.
Councilor.
In size.
Thank you. Now, in your report, you spoke about not recommending a temporary use bylaw, which actually the mayor brought up at the, I believe, the public meeting as a possible way to do this, so that kind of a permission would be granted in a temporary sense up to, what, 3 years? And then it could be then determined whether this fit into the neighborhood or didn't fit, or gave everybody kind of a chance to get used to it. My thought process was, I think this is a really unique way for this particular family to help keep that family farm, really. And I think it's, just from what I've seen over the last while, it's getting more and more difficult for farms and farmland people to be able to keep their properties, you know? There's not a lot of money in farming. So to me, this was a pretty unique way to generate some more income, and I personally think it's a good idea. I think that some of the neighbors need a bit of time to adjust, you know, to a new scenario. I think we need to be flexible as a council to allow these things, but to do it in a careful, kind of measured way. So I'm going to put forward that temporary bylaw use should be a part of this. And then the pies, it gives them a chance to try this out. It gives them a chance to see if this kind of business is going to fly. It gives the neighbors a chance to actually see how this is going to work, and maybe realize that the impact to them is minimal to nothing, is what I'm hoping, because I really think the pies have every intention of being neighborly, good neighbors, and being extremely cooperative with the folks at that end of the road. So I guess my thought process is that maybe that temporary use bylaw is something that we should be looking at until, I don't know, I guess it gives everybody a chance to get their feet wet on this. So that's what I'm recommending, is that be part of this bylaw.
Okay, do I have a second to that amendment, please? Councillor Kenny, are there any questions or comments to that amendment? Members of council? Members of staff, any questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the report alluded to, Mrs. LaRock did speak to the pies, which were not in favor of a temporary use bylaw because of the scheduling conflicts that would pose to future wedding events, because usually you plan a wedding, it's about a year in advance. So the maximum temporary use bylaw that council can put time-wise is up to 3 years. If there is then an extension request, if there's an application fee to do so, then council at that time can then again extend that bylaw to whatever council sees fit.
Councillor Dubb-Butters?
Well, I realize that is maybe not their perfect scenario, but I think that there has to be some consideration given for the folks that live out there as well. And that's why I'm trying to find a balance of, you know, this farm family looking to create a new revenue stream, balancing the interests of their immediate neighbors. So that's my thought process. I think that if they came back, if they get this up and running and they come back in year 2, they don't have to wait 3 years. They could come back in year 2 and say, you know, we've been good neighbors, everything's going well, we're looking at that extension. The council of the day could essentially grant that, no? And they could ask for the fee to be waived as well, Could they not?
Mr. Aquilina?
Mr. Mayor, council has a prescribed bylaw for all planning application fees. There would have to be an amendment to that bylaw to not require the fee. So it would be a discretionary aspect of council to provide that direction. But we would need the fee up front, so council could, in fact, deal with that request prior to the application being made. So it's up to council what they would direct.
Councilor Butters?
So are you saying that they would, that not only the zoning fee, but then the additional fee has to all have to be paid up front?
Mr. Aquilina?
Right now,
For
through you,
the
Mr. Mayor,
extension?
this application was for a zoning bylaw amendment,
Right.
$3,500 city application fee, regional review fee as well. This bylaw on a temporary basis, it is then a $1,500 application fee to extend the temporary use bylaw.
Well, that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me. Like, it would cost you less to have it put in place, which may or may not work great. I'm not sure, am I not understanding this?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, if the applicant knew it was only for a temporary nature, it is then a $3,000 application fee for a temporary use bylaw. Because they have paid the $3,500 that's required for the zoning bylaw amendment, council then can make a decision to pass that zoning bylaw, but on a temporary nature, and set a time frame as to when that temporary use bylaw would expire. It would then be up to the applicant to then come back to council to request an extension of that temporary use bylaw. That is a $1,500 request fee.
Councilor?
And do they have to pay that $1,500 today, or would they do that 2 years from now or 3 years from now, and when that came about?
Mr. Aquilina?
When that came about.
Okay,
They've already paid that fee, so if council sets a 3-year time period, if they want to go beyond those 3 years, it's a $1,500 application fee.
Councilor?
okay. Well, I'm suggesting that, you know, if we're doing this to give that neighborhood a chance, that, I mean, how many times does this really happen in the real world, where temporary use bylaws come into effect, and then is it a unusual occurrence or a usual occurrence?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, it's not very seldom that you have actually requests for temporary use bylaws.
Right.
I know that there's been other uses that have been granted temporary uses in nature, and the applicant has never came back to council.
And the use just continues,
The
and
use just
everybody
continues,
gets
and-
along, and life is fine, and away we go.
And if a complaint was to be received on this particular property, the individual would be in violation of the zoning bylaw, because council
Right.
set a time frame as to when that temporary use was to cease.
Okay.
So
Well, I'm going to suggest that we would maybe look at amending that, because I don't see why somebody would have to pay an additional $1,500, you know, for that, like, then to go ahead and say, okay, make it a completed zoning application, and everybody's okay with it, and it's not about another extension, it would be then just completing it. To me, this is like a trial basis to see how it would really work.
And let me
And
ask.
is that our only option?
Let me try to help out here. Let me ask this, Mr. Aquilina, if in fact we had problems with this recommendation, so down the road, 5 months, 6 months, a year down the road, we start receiving, or the ward councilors start receiving a myriad of different complaints, can this bylaw actually be rescinded?
Mr. Mayor, there would have to be another formal process, another planning process to rescind that bylaw, because the zoning is in place.
So the answer is yes.
It could be done.
Right.
It could be done.
Why? Well, what I'm getting at, Councillor, is that, although I know, I hear you and I respect and appreciate what you're trying to do, I think at the end of the day, if the proponent was to come back and want that extension after 3 years, to then now have to collect another $1,500 off them, I think that might be, you know, not acceptable. Having said that, you're trying to balance out the concerns of the residents. Hence the question, if there's problems down the road, can we actually rescind the bylaw by pulling it and then essentially bringing it back to where it stands now? Mr. Howe?
Under the Planning Act, the temporary use bylaw provides for consideration of a temporary use for 3 years, exactly what it is, with extensions. If you pass a full-fledged zoning bylaw, if you pass a bylaw 2 or 3 years down and repeal it, you are down zoning, and you are liable or could be liable for costs. And I I don't want to get into it because it's a legal discussion, a legal argument, but to simply repeal the bylaw without the approval, you could end up with problems. The temporary use bylaw permits you to refuse the future if you want to. If you straight outright zone it, repealing it later down the road will attract potentially any kind of an action.
Well, the city of Welland's doing that right now in Dean City, aren't they?
Yep.
Ball's in your court, Councilor.
Well, then I'm gonna put it forward as, to have as a temporary, because I do feel that, you know, that these interests have to be somewhat balanced, and there isn't any reason why we can't change the $1,500 fee, you know, somewhere between now and 3 years from now to $100. You know what I'm saying? Like, that part sounds to me easier to be changed, so that, because I don't want to stick the pies with a $1,500 tag on this either. Like, that's the last thing I want to do, but I do want to balance the interests of the neighbors, as well as giving them a good opportunity to see if they can make a go of this. Because I, quite frankly, think it's a great idea.
Right. Thank you, Councillor. And I'm not sure I totally agree with the CAO, and I wasn't being facetious. You know, I see this. I see the city of Welland going through that same process right now, with over 100 acres of property down in the south end of Dean City, and the region's a big part of that as well. That's why I see it as much as I do, and I'm not sure how much liability they're exposing themselves to. I didn't believe there was any, because they have that ability. But I have heard from some of the residents, and they're not very pleased about it, especially one particular resident. But I'm not sure how that's playing out. Dan, is there some exposure to liability there if we repeal it after the fact?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not totally familiar with the situation. Well, I've just read about it, so I just know that they're looking to change some of the land use from urban to rural.
So bringing it here with respect to this, if we were to revert or to repeal the bylaw, are we exposing ourselves to liability?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not.
Unfair question. Fair enough. Okay.
I don't want to comment on that.
Okay, so, Councillor, you got a choice. You want to leave that amendment on the table?
I will.
Okay.
And the rest of council can decide.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So we do have it seconded. Any further questions or comments, members of council, to the amendment only? All those in favor? All those in favor? Is your hand going up, or you got a question? I got a question. Councillor Danch.
Just because of the organized confusion that's going on here. So you want to make this a 3-year temporary thing, and then after that time, if everything's all good in the neighborhood and everyone's getting along, they would come back and reapply, and then we could possibly adjust the fee at that time? Is that what we're saying here?
Yes. In short, yes. Basically, make a reapplication for exemption, for an extension, I guess, for lack of a better word. And then, of course, attached to that would be a $1,500 fee. Then the council of the day can vote to waive that fee. See, it's not as disorganized as you thought it was. Councillor, that's your motion. Any further questions or clarification, comments? Okay, council's pleasure on the vote or on the motion. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? 1. Okay, that will be carried. It's carried. So, to the main motion again, as amended. Okay, so basically we have a motion here. Mr. Aquilina, do you understand this? Are you okay?
I do.
Any questions?
No, and I think I understand. Council is looking to have a temporary use bylaw for this property for a 3-year period.
Okay, so basically, and the reason why I ask you if you understand is because the recommendation, this pretty well eliminates number 1, so it really isn't an amendment. It's actually going in a different direction, because it did recommend that we approve the zoning bylaw amendment, but you're actually saying that we actually pass a temporary amendment. Madam Clerk, any comment on that with respect to the recommendation that's there? 2 and 3 are easy. I'm just more worried about number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On that question, there's also a bylaw listed on your agenda this evening for the zoning bylaw amendment. As a result of the amendment that was just passed to the recommendation, the bylaw will need to be withdrawn and presented at the next council meeting. So to Mr. Mayor, your question, perhaps as a suggestion, it may be desirable for council to refer the report back to staff to report back on the appropriate changes and the correct recommendation for the
And
report.
bylaw. Great, thank you, Madam Clerk. So basically, Councilor, what you're asking for, which is passed, it goes to the first part of the recommendation, Barb, which actually is passing it in a temporary fashion versus passing the actual amendment. Okay, so I'm hearing from the clerk that staff's going to come back with not only bylaw from the clerk's office, but as a temporary
Yes,
nature.
Mr. Mayor, that's what we'll have to do, is change the bylaw, refer to a different section of the Planning Act, and do it on a temporary basis for a period of 3 years.
Okay, so back to the main motion again, if I can have a motion to refer this back to staff for the next meeting. As amended, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Demeray, no questions or comments, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried, thank you. Barbara, well, I'm not sure who can answer that question. Dan, is it time sensitive?
In what respect, Mr. Mayor?
With the pies, is it time sensitive? Do you know, Barb? In your discussions with them, is it time sensitive?
I can't.
Oh, there he is. You're still here. If you just want to turn the mic on there, Mr. Pine, and you're good to go.
I understand the concerns about the neighbors, and I also understand where you're going with when it comes to the temporary. But how do you expect us to invest in the property, tenants, do all that work, when there's no guarantee that down the road it's going to, you're going to give me the extension? So you're kind of tying my hands on this. I can be the best neighbor, there is, and Lori and I are well aware that there are issues here. But then to say, well, you know what, 3 years down the road, we're going to, look at the issue again. It's obviously not a very common thing. So what do Lori and I do? Sit down and say, okay, do we spend the money on a tent? Do we regrade? Do we run in water? Do we do all of that? It really doesn't make sense economically to us. So I understand the concerns, but what do we do for 3 years?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, you know what, when it comes to noise, it's not going to be an issue. There's bylaws for noise. But you went through all your departments, for road and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, having land rezoned, you do it constantly. You do it all the time. And then all of a sudden you come to us and say, well, you know what? Let's give them a 3-year maybe on this. Really doesn't make sense to us. I mean, we'll go with it if we have to. But how often do you do this to other businesses? Say, you know what? We'll give you a trial basis. It doesn't make sense to us at all. I mean, this is good for the city of Port Colborne. You have a wedding, you bring people in from out of town. I mean, they look for places to stay, restaurants, all that kind of stuff. This is good for the city. It's a good fit. And we'll make it work, and we'll make it work with our neighbors. But to sit down and say, well, you know what, we'll try this for 3 years, when I don't see this happening with any other businesses around, doesn't make sense at all. We wouldn't have done this if it was going to create a problem with our neighbors. So,
okay.
Yeah, I understand where it's coming from, but it doesn't make sense economically. And if any of you were running a business, you'd look at it the same way. So what do you want us to do for 3 years? Invest our money in this? So it doesn't make sense to me at all. And I'm sure it doesn't make sense to most councilors too. It really doesn't. There's no way Lori and I would go out of our way. Or when we started this, we looked at our neighbors and said, listen, we're secluded here. Yes, there are some neighbors that might create a problem with, but it does not make sense economically to us at all. So I don't know. I mean, even planning department said you know, it doesn't make sense to have a 3-year. What do Lori and I do when it comes to booking weddings? I don't understand how that's going to work. So.
Okay, great, thank you.
Well, and the other issue was then how quickly this had to be done.
Yeah, we were looking for an answer on, is this time sensitive? In
Well-
terms of, or you just want to get to work, basically?
Well, you know what, if it is passed, then we have to look at grading and seeding and getting the area ready. So usually that should start in September when it comes to seeding and getting sod down. So, you know, the longer you delay it, the more of a problem it becomes
Right.
for us.
Okay.
So.
And of course, as we chatted in the past, this can be likened to a winery that has different events happening at a winery out in a rural area, such as weddings and different functions like that.
This isn't something new that we're doing. This is done all over the place. You look at Niagara-on-the-Lake, they're all over the place.
Okay.
And they're not getting, you know, they're not being told, well, you know, we'll give it to you for 3 years, because nothing would happen out there. And I don't understand why Port Colborne just can't take the leap and say, okay, let's do this, because everybody else is doing it.
Great.
Without the 3-year. So is this a done deal then, with the 3-year
No.
thing?
Well, no, we still have the council portion of tonight's agenda to go through, too.
Okay.
So just be patient.
I'll be patient. You know what? I understand, you know, where you're coming from, I really do. And Lori and I will work with any decision you make. It's just, you kind of tie our hands on this one. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pai. Councilor Butters?
Yeah, I wanted just to relate a story that I heard from another individual, and it actually ties right into what you said about, you know, the wineries that are doing this up in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And they talked to me about one of the places that started off very, very small, and they had, you know, adjacent neighbors, but not real close, but, you know, close enough. And when it was small, it was fine, but it grew and it grew and it grew. And now those same people who live close to this winery, you know, now contend with the busyness of that business, right? So that's why I'm saying to try to find some balance here is important. And when I talked to Dan earlier, he had said, like, the applicant doesn't have to wait for 3 years. They could come back in 2 years and say, listen, everything's going along well, you know, 0 issues. We want to start that process of,
This has already been voted on, so we've
Okay.
turned that page.
Okay,
So
but I'm just saying,
now we're
like,
looking at
there's other possibilities.
No, absolutely.
So-
And so we're looking at right now, time sensitivity. I'm hearing no, although they'd like to get to work. I'm hearing no, it isn't time sensitive. So we're now looking at deferring this for staff to come back. Now, albeit, even if it's deferred, it still can be raised at council. Okay, so you know, we still have that hoop to jump through as well. So the message I'm hearing right now is staff would appreciate an opportunity to come back with this as per the past amended motion. So with that, I would ask for a motion to defer to staff to come back at the next meeting, or I would say refer to staff to come back to the next meeting as per the amended motion. Okay, so Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Butters, all those in favor? To refer back to staff, opposed? That would be carried, thank you. Okay, we're now going to move on to notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion this evening? Mr. Pyle wouldn't leave the building yet. I wouldn't, we still, as I mentioned earlier, we still have the council portion to go through. Okay. We haven't ratified that decision yet. Okay, this is only, no problem, no problem. We're just coming out of committee of the whole. See, some councils will go through committee of the whole in 1 week and council the following week. And council basically ratifies the decisions of committee of the whole, whether they're separate committees or they're done as one committee of the whole. What we do here in Port Colborne to try to expedite a lot of the decisions is we do it the same night. So we do a committee of the whole meeting, we discuss, we deliberate, we debate, we come to a decision, and then when we go into our council meeting, that ratifies those decisions. But sometimes people can have a change of thought from then to then, and decisions can change. So I always encourage people to stick around just in case. Okay, thank you. With that, members of council, are there any notices of motion?
No, before you get into that, though.
Go ahead, council.
I just have a point of order. Like, we dealt with an issue, and then we came back to it with a referral motion. Should that not have been included in the original motion? So you're saying we passed a motion that staff knows they have to take this report back and bring it back to us?
No.
Where does the referral come in?
No, what we passed was that we create a temporary bylaw.
Correct. So
Okay,
we're
staff-
taking, yeah, so we're defeating what was on the committee portion.
We amended it. We amended it by instead of amending the bylaw, we're amending the bylaw temporarily.
Well, not, I'll
Okay.
disagree because you're not, you can't, and we heard this from the clerk, you're not amending it, you actually have to come back with a whole new bylaw. So are we really not defeating what we had here, which was a bylaw that allows us to go on indefinitely? So we don't want that, so now we gotta come back with a new bylaw, which is now a temporary use bylaw. It's totally different. That's where I'm confused here.
And you're half right. That's why I asked.
And I'd like the clerk to clarify this, because I don't think I'm half right.
Well, she already did. That's why, and she was the one that confirmed that you're half right. So if you allow me,
Well, yeah,
Counselor,
I
if you allow me.
disagree, but anyways.
What we're doing is, and that's why I asked the clerk to comment on it, because and this is where I think you're going with this, is that the actual bylaw initially asked for an amendment to the bylaw. And what the council has asked for is that amendment be temporary. So we're sort of in between. Is it totally against the gist or the intent of the bylaw? Not really, because you're still moving forward with an amendment of the bylaw, but yet you're doing it in a temporary fashion. The other half of it is hence the reason for it to go back to staff. So that was passed. The actual amended bylaw was passed in a temporary fashion, but staff had asked for it to go back, and the clerk has asked, because she has to actually change the bylaw, for it to go back. The staff's going to come back with a report that shows it in a temporary fashion, as well as the clerk is going to have an opportunity now to actually change the bylaw, change the actual wording of the bylaw. Is that correct, staff? Just to verify that, Mr. Aquilina? You're going to have to, yes, you have to come back with a whole new bylaw.
Mr. Mayor, we definitely need the new bylaw to come back because we still have a planning process. Council has a zoning bylaw application that it needs to deal with. So through the new bylaw, it's going to address the actual application. It's going to refer to the proper sections. It's going to refer to the timeframes.
Exactly.
So that report is definitely required, and the new bylaw needs to come back.
Right. Thank you. Councilor?
Which in essence, because we're making so many changes, I think that's where the clerk stepped in, is that, in fact, this bylaw really is null and void. But I don't understand why we tell staff what we want to do, which was put a temporary use bylaw, we pass all that, and then now we come back to a second motion that says refer it. Aren't we doing that in essence by saying, this bylaw is not good enough, this is what we want? Does it not automatically go back to staff? Does it have to be actionable or referral?
Well, I think for the most part.
I don't know, I'd like clarification.
And you raise a good point. I think what we're trying to do here is give staff an opportunity to actually fill in the blanks with respect to the timing and all the particulars that actually makes it temporary versus outright the amendment that was outlined within the report. The second part of that is to ensure that the proper language that comes out of that report actually goes into the bylaw. So that's why I've asked that once it was amended to be temporary, with the bylaw that was attached to it, that actually you refer that back to staff to come back to the report in a temporary fashion that would actually recommend a temporary amendment to the bylaw for a 3-year term. And then, of course, with that, attached to that, for the council portion of the agenda, would include a bylaw that would have the proper wording to it, that being temporary. Mr. Howe?
Your Worship, legislation requires that bylaws be as presented. Because of the amendment, the bylaw must be pulled. It can't be presented in that form or fashion. It can't be passed tonight on that form. So the recommendation to council is that the bylaw be amended. It will be pulled by the clerk in before it's pulled. The recommendation is now to council that it be referred to staff. Both of those recommendations now have to come before council.
If I can add to that too, the bylaw itself has to be posted. So the bylaw has to have notice itself. So we can't just change a bylaw arbitrarily tonight and go. It does have to be given notice. Right. Counselor?
I understand that. That's not the clarification I was looking for. My clarification is that when it comes up under committee, or the council portion, how are we debating this now? So you have something coming forward out of this committee into council. So is it the two motions that we have to, if we want to defeat them? That's the process I want. So do we really need a referral, which limits the debate in the referral? There is limited debate on that. And, well, that's what comes forward to council. So
It's a good question.
That's
Madam
my
Clerk?
question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In my opinion, the essence of the question that is being asked now is really a matter of the precedence of motions under parliamentary procedure. So what was on the floor was a motion from the report, and then we had an amendment which was approved. But then we had a recommendation that was introduced that was a referral, and that in order of parliamentary procedure, a referral motion takes precedence over any other motions that are on the floor. So the way that I have it recorded in the minutes is that council has, in committee, referred the report back to staff with direction to come back to report back on the temporary nature of the zoning bylaw amendment.
So to take that a step further, Madam Clerk, when it now enters into the council portion of tonight's agenda, council will be voting on the referral motion.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right, then I'll bring it up. That's fine. That's the one you have. That's what I said.
And I know you were going with that. And that's essentially what you needed, was how it's going to be addressed at the council portion of tonight's agenda.
Clarification on that.
Gotcha. Okay, members of council, moving on to notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion? Okay, members, I need a motion to adjourn this portion of tonight's agenda, please. Councillor Desmarais. Councillor Danch, you're slipping. Councillor Danch. Okay, so it has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you, members of council. We're now going to open up the regular meeting of council. Madam Clerk, introduction of any addendum items this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One item that I would like to note for council is the withdrawal of the bylaw associated with the zoning bylaw amendment as approved by recommendation during the committee of the whole meeting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Members of council, are we looking for a motion to confirm the agenda, please? Mover and seconder, Councillor Danch, Councillor Elliott. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Disclosures of interest. Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4.
Thank you, Councillor. Further disclosures, members? With none, we do have one set of minutes, the adoption of the 19th meeting regular of council dated July 14th, 2014. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Steele, Councillor Desmarais. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Items requiring separate discussion. I'll go to Councillor Butters. Same item if you want for Councillor Bodnar, please, for his conflict.
Absolutely.
I believe that's item 4. Councillor Steele.
Well, yeah, if we want to bring forward items, and I want to bring forward an item, so,
It's item 4. It's already been listed.
Number 4, you brought it up.
yes, but she's bringing it forward for the conflict, right? Well, no, because now you've had a clerk, this is what's confusing, because the counselor can actually vote on the referral now. His conflict no longer stands because based on what I've read, is that direction of council is sitting there. He's not voting in favor of this person, he's just voting in favor of whether council's decision is correct.
That would be up to the councillor.
Yeah, I understand, but based on what I've been told by my lawyer and what I've read, is that once decisions have been made, councilors.
Free
can
advice,
get
Ron.
involved.
Take
But
it.
anyways, that's fine. I just want clarification through you, your worship, to the clerk, how we handle this referral and, because in essence, it was 2 motions brought forward and you flipped them, as you've noted. How do you want us to debate this? Or how do you want us to bring it forward?
Madam Clerk.
Just want clarification on
Madam
that.
Clerk.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, council will be debating and considering the referral to staff.
First. That's it.
That's it, yes.
That's it.
Thank you. So if council decides to defeat that deferral, can the original bylaw come back?
The amended bylaw.
No, there is no amendment.
Madam Clerk, there would be the amended bylaw? Or, I'm sorry, the amended motion, or would be the original motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council would be debating the, as long as it was moved and seconded, the original recommendation in the report.
Okay.
If it was moved and seconded in that manner. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, we all are understanding that now? Okay. Okay. With that, members of council, we'll now move on to the determination, or I'm sorry, the adoption of the remaining items, please. Mover and seconder, Councillor Steele, Councillor Butters, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. We'll now move in right into item 4. Councillor Butters. Hold on. Councillor Butters, go ahead. I'm sorry, Councillor Bodnar, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With all due respect to Councillor Steele and his law degree that's hanging on his wall, I would prefer. I didn't see it when we were in the meeting the other day, so I still will declare a conflict on this, and having not checked with my lawyer, so and not knowing Councillor Steele's.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Butters?
So I'm going to read this.
You're presenting the original motion.
The original motion, conflict for Councilor Bodnar. I'm not sure. Yeah, you need to.
Hold on. The original motion is was to refer. That's the one you want to accept first, right, Madam Clerk? So essentially, you're putting a motion on the table to refer this motion back to staff for the next meeting of council.
Okay. Then I'm putting that motion forward to refer this back to staff.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder to that, please?
Oops.
Councillor Kenny, there's no debate on a referral? Are you going to allow debate on a referral? Or just a deferral you don't have debate on? I thought in our procedural bylaw it was both.
If it's deferred, you don't. Referred, I think you can.
Councillor Elliott, you actually wanted to debate the referral?
This stuff is not news for
Then you go back to the original motion, which you can then vote on. Right.
A referral.
Page 12.
It's not a deferral, it's a referral.
Referral. A deferral is, I don't think you can
Okay,
debate.
referral is open for debate. Councillor Elliott. It's already been seconded. Councillor Kenny seconded it?
Oh, okay, then you second it, and
So you made the clerk look for nothing. Nice guy.
do you want me
Go
to
ahead.
speak to the referral? After listening to the proponent, no, I want to defeat the referral. Let's make a decision. Let's give him a chance. 3 years, it's a moving target. How you gonna base, if you give him a 3-year trial, how does he pass? I mean, is it a complaint driven, the neighbors say somebody's got concern against him and says, I don't want him to do it anymore, and then it's up in the air, then he's got to reapply, then it may get defeated, he can't run his business like that. I say we defeat the referral, we go with what the staff recommendation was, let the gentleman and the proponents work with their neighbors. I'm sure that they can make it work. When you take a look at the property, he's far away. I mean, we're letting people have weddings in their backyard with neighbors close at hand. This is out on a farm. We're limiting them to the amount of people he can have by the size of the tent. You know what? When I first heard about this, I thought this a great idea. If I had your piece of property, I'd be looking at the same thing. I'm going to say no to the referral. Let's go to staff recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments? Councillor Steele?
I will not be supporting the referral.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Butters?
I only have one, Mr. Mayor. The reason I asked for this referral is simply that I need to represent the interests of all people along that road, Mr. Pye as well as the neighbors. So that was what I was looking for, was some balance. Obviously, I think that this is a great idea. I support the the idea that they want to do this. Absolutely. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments on the motion? Members of council? Councillor Danch? Members of council? I will call the vote. This is for the referral. Okay? All those in favor to refer back to staff? Opposed? It's lost. Okay, so we're back to the original motion now. Now, Madam Clerk, you're sure it's the original motion, not the amended motion, right?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this point in time, the referral has lost, so we require a new motion to be introduced. So if council would like to debate the original recommendation that was presented in the staff report, a member of council will need to move, and another member of council will need to second that recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Steele?
Thank you, Your Worship. Then I will move, that the Council of the City of Port Colborne approve the zoning bylaw amendment attached here too as Appendix A, rezoning the land from A agricultural to A 379 special events. 2, that the city clerk is hereby authorized and directed to proceed with the giving of the notice and passing of the bylaw in accordance with the Planning Act. 3, that pursuant to the provisions of Section 3417 of the Planning Act, no further notice of public meeting would be required.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Elliott? Any questions or comments to that motion? With no further comments or questions, Mr. Aquilini, you're clear on that? You've learned, eh? No further questions, members of council. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? That'll be carried. Thank you. Thank you. It's passed. Yes, members of council, that based on your referral at the committee of the whole, okay, that bylaw would have been pulled, but now that it has been passed in its original form, the bylaw will now present itself in this portion of tonight's agenda.
Correct.
Okay? Good. Okay. Now, I have a young lady back there.
Can I make one comment?
Wow. Go ahead. If you just want to press the button there.
I'd just like to thank council for your wisdom and guidance and all this. And I actually thought of running for council someday, but believe me, after tonight, I don't think so.
Thank you, Mr. Pye.
Oh, I like to thank Shannon and everybody else in City Hall that worked on this. They did a great job, and Lori and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we won't let you guys down.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now, I do have a young lady sitting back there that's been very patient, waiting for this proclamation. Actually, I'm surprised you're actually still here. So we are going to move right into that proclamation, and that being Lighthouse Day, August 9, 2014. Members of council, I will be looking for a mover and seconder. That whereas the 7th of August is National Lighthouse Day, most groups are celebrating August 9th and 10th. And whereas Port Colborne is home to 2 lighthouses offering public tours on a regular basis, first being during canal days and others during other parts of the year, such as August 9th and 10th. And whereas Port Colborne is a marine-based city, and whereas these lighthouses have been declared surplus, and Friends of the Port Colborne Lighthouses is working towards stewardship of them in order to be saved, restored, as well as toured. And whereas Great Lakes National Lighthouse Day is August 9th, 2014, now therefore I, Mayor Ransom Badaway, proclaim August 9th as Lighthouse Day here in the city of Port Colborne. If I can have a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bodner, Councillor Doucette. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried with no referral, no recorded vote. You're done. And thank you for your patience this evening. I appreciate it. Members, we'll now move on to the minutes of boards, commissions, and committees. I do have 2 sets, and if you don't mind, I will do it in a block. I do have the minutes of the Canal Days Advisory Committee meeting of June 18th, 2014, and secondly, the minutes of the Port Colborne Public Library Board meeting of June 3rd, 2014. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Elliott, Councillor Kenny. Any questions or comments to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Are there any notices of motion? With none, we'll move on to the introduction of the bylaws. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the following bylaws be read 3 times and finally passed. Bylaw 61077314 being a bylaw to appoint Gerald Beamer of Blue Knight Security as a bylaw enforcement officer. Bylaw 61087414 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 11509781 respecting part of lots 19 and 20, concession 1, formerly Township of Hummerston, now in the City of Port Colborne, Regional Municipality of Niagara, municipally known as 736 Weaver Road. Bylaw 61097514 being a bylaw to authorize entering into amended lease agreement with the Junior A Niagara Whalers Ice Hockey Club for the Valley Health and Wellness Center, and to repeal bylaw 60996514. Bylaw 61107614 being a bylaw to provide for advance votes to be held prior to voting day for the 2014 municipal and school board elections. And finally, bylaw 61117714 being a bylaw to provide for earlier opening and reduced hours of voting in institutions and retirement homes on voting day, and to repeal bylaw 4900125006.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Members of Council, mover and seconder, please. Councillor Butters, Councillor Elliott. Questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Madam Clerk, the confirmatory bylaw, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the following bylaw be read 3 times and finally passed. Bylaw 61127814 being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its special and regular meetings of July 28, 2014.
Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Danch, Councillor Desmarais. Questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. And before I ask for a motion to go into closed session, I do want to once again encourage all those folks to come out to Canal Days this weekend. Everyone throughout the region as well as abroad. We're looking forward to seeing you all here, hopefully during sunny weather. So with that, if I can entertain a motion to go into closed session, that council do now proceed in camera in order to address the following matters. A, the minutes of the closed session portion of the July 14th, 2014 regular council meeting. And secondly, the verbal report from the Chief Administrative Officer conveying legal advice concerning matters impacting the Port Colborne Energy Parks pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsection 2392C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, subsection 2392E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and subsection 2392F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bodnar, Councillor Kenny. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you on the weekend during Canal Days.